Chapter 301 The 26-year-old General. The Naval Headquarters, the Marshal's Office. At this moment, the high-level naval officers are already in place, waiting for someone to arrive. If it's just a Drake, Roha can report directly to Sengoku, and naturally they don't need to be so mobilized to appear here collectively. But Loya actually met Drago on the way back. This matter has to be carefully considered. At the head of the desk, Sengoku carefully reviewed the report submitted by Loya, and asked Carp on the side of his hand. Dorag, who has always been cautious, can call so many senior officials at the same time. What do you think? What does the boy want? The fact that Drago is Carp's son has long been gagged, and not many people know about it in the world government, let alone ordinary naval soldiers. However, none of these included the strong men in front of him, so Sengoku didn't mean to hide his words when he asked, and went directly to Garp. As the saying goes, there is no better son than a father. Even if the two have different ideas, Garp should have guessed a little bit of the inside story. However, quack. Carp nibbled at the senbei casually, and replied without raising his head, how do I know what he wants to do? We haven't seen each other for many years, the devil knows what's going on with him now. That makes sense. However, seeing Cap's dangling appearance, Sengoku suddenly became angry and slapped the table fiercely. Cap. Be serious. Now. As soon as he saw Sengoku's actions, Lieutenant General Crane knew what he was going to do, and immediately interrupted him. Okay, Sengoku. It's all about the old calendar, and why do you care? Now we still think carefully about what to do. How to deal with the actions of the Silencer Army. Hearing it was Crane, Sengoku muttered a few words in dissatisfaction and sat back in his seat. That is, at this moment, the door of the office was gently knocked, and Loya's voice entered the room. Report. Please come in. As soon as he stepped into the door, Loya was taken aback by the posture of the three tribunals of the big bosses in front of him. I quickly recalled that I didn't seem to have caused any trouble in the past 2 days, so I felt relieved and walked to the opposite side of the conference table calmly. Marshal Sengoku, what is your business with me? Oh, that's it. Sengoku raised the paper in his hand and said to Loya, we have also read your report. Let's put aside the matter that Drake was taken away by the Cannibal Island owner, but about as you mentioned in your report, about the movement of the Silencer Army, there are still several doubts that need to be clarified. Quote. Sure enough, you know that you can't hide it from these old foxes. Loya sighed inwardly, but his expression was not so depressed. This is what he expected, and it is still planned to be arraigned at this moment. Immediately, Loya sat upright and nodded seriously, yes. Marshal Sengoku. Then, Sengoku glanced at the silent bosses, and finally put his eyes on Loya and asked seriously, first of all, can you guarantee the authenticity of this information? Yes, and there are hundreds of soldiers who are with you as evidence, please check the marshal. Well, now please tell me how you escaped from Dorag. This question may seem unnecessary, but in fact it is the focus of this meeting. No one could have imagined that the little guy who caused trouble all day had grown to the point where he could fight against Drago. As a high-ranking Navy officer, and Dorag's former officer before defecting from the Navy, Sengoku is well aware of the talent and strength of the world's most vicious criminal. It's not that he grows others' ambition to destroy his own prestige. In all fairness, he doesn't think that the three current generals can be Dorag's opponents one-on-one. And then faced with such a terrifying guy, was Roha able to bring the team back unscathed? Or in the case that he took the initiative to kill Ivankov? Dorag is not a good stubble. Even if he can release water, he will not release too much water. So the question is, what is the strength of Loya at this moment? He is really just above Lieutenant General Kuzan's evaluation. Is the general dissatisfied? What kind of strength should have what kind of status? Sengoku is very worried about having such power but not revealing it. Moreover, as one of the only insiders, Sengoku knows very well how big the plan of Loya and Zephyr is. He is really afraid now that Loya will be the next Dorag. For Sengoku, question, Loya said he understood very well. Buckling his cheeks, Roja said to himself uncertainly, I don't know what level of strength I am at now, but if you are one-on-one, because of the restraint of attributes, you should be able to fight against Mr. Kuzan in the battle of life and death. 5 to 5. This evaluation is not Loya's rhetoric, but a fact. Having gradually approached his true awakened form, his resistance to ice has now reached an unimaginable level. It is not that he is prejudiced against Kuzan, but the fact. If nothing else, it's not a problem to swallow the mouth of Kuzan's 10 violent pheasants just because of his seldom used big snake. Moreover, because of the side effects of magic, the ice of Loya can contact the entity of the natural fruit ability person. If it really wants to fight, Kuzan is not at a loss. However, although what he said was a fact, Kuzan's face quickly darkened. When Loya came back that day, the appearance that he ate a violent pheasant's mouth in front of him was still deeply in his memory. Loya didn't dare to attack him before, except for his resistance, he couldn't keep up. The most important reason was the impact. A simple physical shock can directly smash him into pieces, regardless of whether you are the Ice Dragon Slayer or not. However, now he not only keeps up with resistance, but also ignores his own freezing. He also ignored the impact inertia of his own attacks by relying on his strange power. To be honest, for this kind of disciple who specially restrained his teacher, Kuzan thought it would be better for him to drown. However, this idea seems to be difficult to achieve. After listening to Loya's statement, Sengoku didn't show any emotion and turned to look at Kuzan. That scrutiny made Kuzan's face ashen, but he didn't dare to be biased in this kind of thing, so he glared at Loya and nodded helplessly. If we really want to fight, now Loya probably won't be afraid of any of us. This turned out to be true. Not only Sengoku, but even Akainu, who was expressionless from the moment Roja entered the door, showed a rare shock at this moment. Because of the start of the meeting, Garp, who gave up senbei and turned to eat the donut, suddenly stiffened, turning his head to look at Loya with a ghostly look. TF. How old is Loya now? It's only 26 years old, right? What are you doing when you are 26? He must have just walked out of the boot camp, and he was holding a gun with Sengoku and the others as a big soldier, right? Even a genius is not so scary, right? 26-year-old general. As a veteran of the Navy, Karp is very clear about one thing, that is, the strength of the current 3 generals is above the average level of the 3 generals of the Navy. Even more than a lot. Loya can make Kuzan make this evaluation, then his strength positioning is already obvious. Looking at the little guy who was young but already had the style of a general, Sengoku rubbed his temples. Okay, this is the end of the matter. Next, let's discuss things about the Silencer Army. Chapter 302 Clearance Plan. Sengoku will skip this matter directly, but what else can it be? Give Loya a general backup position. Just kidding, waiting for the grand prize is an emergency strategy that is only taken when the generals are short of candidates. Choose a powerful existence from the current headquarters to replace the position of the general. Now the 3 generals are still alive and well, making Loya a backup is not pulling hatred. Moreover, Loya is now, after all, a little too young. This is not discriminating against young people, but stating a fact. The Navy is not a pirate group, and the factor that determines its status is not just based on strength. As a well-disciplined unit, if you want to continue to move up, there is no shortcut other than the accumulation of military exploits over the years. Loya was able to ascend to the position of Lieutenant General of the headquarters from the very beginning. In addition to the assassination mission wagered by the Assos family of the Tianlong people, he still took advantage of the death battle in prison. And next, Loya wants to go further, but it is as difficult as going to the sky. Because the Navy has not encountered such a thing that the 3 current generals are at their peak and are caught up by the new bloodlines for a long time. Loya's current status as a lieutenant general, for 99% of the world's navies, is already a goal worth striving for in a lifetime. So, Sengoku can only make a difference now and let Loya join the next important meeting. Ordinary lieutenant generals have no chance to discuss with them the qualifications for silencing military affairs. As for Sengoku's change of topic, Loya shrugged and didn't say much, and honestly came to Kuzan and sat down. In any case, Kuzan is his teacher, and he himself has been labeled as a Kuzan department. The next thing, just follow the sound. He is not naive enough to think that he is some important person. However, Loya also has his own guesses about the goals of Drago and others. Just look at the original work and you will know that it is undoubtedly preparing for a big event to allow Drago to convene so many cadres from various regions. For Drago, promoting his own ideas and overthrowing the world government is the only answer. Therefore, this time, it is estimated that they plan to go to which country to mobilize the masses and overthrow the regime of that country. However, this guess Loya will not say. It's up to Sengoku and the others to guess this. I think in addition to strengthening the guard along the route, we have to do one more thing. Lieutenant General Crane said at the meeting, the Shemale King Ivankov was severely injured by Loya, and their ships were also damaged. So it is very likely that Drago will give up his goal and choose to go back to recuperate and restructure. Quote. Speaking of this, General Crane put his eyes on Loya and said slowly, therefore, I propose that we can take advantage of this opportunity to make the first move and conduct a thorough investigation of the strongholds we suspect and let them plan to directly abort. Quote. Crane is also an old acquaintance of Dorag. She knows very well what kind of role the new Navy, who was once unparalleled in the limelight, is. It is absolutely impossible for the other party to have a temporary intention and directly pull a large number of subordinates to go out to do things. There will definitely be their bases along the way to support and prepare. Since this is the case, then they will attack the silencer army directly from this point and sabotage Drago's plan. Of course, the premise of this matter is based on the facts stated by Loya. If Dorag was not hit as hard as they expected, this mission would undoubtedly be very dangerous. Because this is tantamount to the official war between the Navy and the silenced army. That would be an unprecedented storm. Loya also understood this. He remembered the imprint he planted on most of Dorag's cadres, and grinned. I agree with Chief He's opinion. When I fought against Dorag, his absolute most of the subordinates have been hit hard by my ice, and now he is alone, and it is impossible to continue the plan. Quote. Although the main effect of the enemy of living beings is powerful, the pain when it is engraved is absolutely unbearable. How long has it been since then? It's less than 2 months full. In addition to Haku's powerful cadres who can hold back the pain and get out of bed, Loya can guarantee that there are not more than 10 cadres in Doragora at this moment. No one is still making a fart. Silence. Drago is definitely on his way back now, ready to recuperate. In other words, Crane's plan is very heady. Hearing Loya's definite words, Suru didn't say much, and turned to look at Sengoku. The latter pondered carefully before agreeing to Crane's plan. With a shop as big as the Navy, it's impossible to completely ignore Akatsuki's movements in the silencer army. It's just that the strongholds that were picked up are usually quiet and have little impact on the situation, so Sengoku just let it go with the mentality of putting a long line to catch big fish. But this combination of Loya's behavior is undoubtedly a good opportunity to greatly weaken the silencer army. There is another sentence behind the long line to catch big fish, that is, you can close it when you see it. Sengoku is called a wise general, and he will not fail to understand this. So, Sengoku gave the order neatly, showing the decisiveness that he should be as a naval marshal. Sakazuki, Pulsalino. I ordered the two of you to lead the team separately, follow the direction of Dorag and clear the silence army's stronghold along the way, and clear the army in the opposite direction. Do you understand? This is a big deal, and even Kizaru doesn't dare to smile at Sengoku at this moment. Immediately, the two stood up neatly and saluted Sengoku. Yes, Marshal Sengoku. Kuzan, you continue to sit in the headquarters, but be ready to assist at any time. Sengoku finished arranging Akainu and Kayabu, and then looked at Kuzan again. To this, Kuzan replied solemnly, Yes. Marshal. As for you, Sengoku kept turning his eyes on Carp and Loya, as if he was considering a trade-off. Cap, I order you to lead the warships and pursue in the direction that Drago might flee. After hearing Sengoku's words, Garp quit at the time. Bastard Sengoku. That bastard has been on the run for over a month. What do you want me to chase after? In the face of Garp's roar, Sengoku roared back on the spot, I'm just looking at you being so idle. Why don't you feel good? Get out of my way now. After the meeting, the group walked out of the gate one by one. Seeing the bright eyes outside, Kuzan lazily gave Heish, Alala, this is really an easy task. With you guys doing it yourself, I don't think I need my support. The strength of Akainu and Kizaru, how to say, even if they really meet Dorag, they will have the power to fight. What Kuzan said is true. However, Carp was very unhappy about this, and said in front of the two, why can you stay in the headquarters and bask in the sun so easily, and my old bones have to go outside? Well, this question is not easy to answer. The benevolent sees the benevolent and the wise sees the wisdom. After Garp failed to pursue Ace, this time was indeed a little too idle. But as a former subordinate of the other party, even as a general, he should be called Mr. Garp respectfully on weekdays, and Kuzan is not easy to interface at all. So, Kuzan didn't answer, turned his head and greeted Loya who was following behind him. Loya, do you want to have a drink? The teacher has an invitation, how dare I refuse? Loya smiled and followed Kuzan's pace and crossed Carp. Behind the two of them, watching them go away, Kizaru said with a wretched smile, I really didn't expect that Luo Yusong, who caused trouble all the time, has grown to such a degree. If we wait a few more years, we can retire with peace of mind. Well, you say so, Sakazuki. In response, Akainu glanced at Kizaru with a calm expression, and left with a snort. The main goal now is to clear the stronghold of the Silencer army, and he has no time to intrigue with Kizaru here. Chapter 303 Frank. With the Silencer army at the front, no one would bother with Loya about such trivial matters as the failure to pursue Drake. Even Akainu, who believes in absolute justice, will not pick on Loya's mission at this time. The frozen ice field in the Drum Kingdom can be confirmed at any time through the photos sent back by Simon. Even the attack of that level failed to leave the opponent. It can only be said that the opponent's strength is very strong. No one can blame this. Loya's head. Returning to his residence, Akainu hung the Admiral's cloak on the hanger and knelt down in the room. What happened to Loya today shocked him more than anyone imagined. Recalling that the first time the two officially met, it was as early as because of the blood marrow worm incident. The Tianlong people beat the navy and sent Rob Luki when. At that time, Loya was very strong, and he froze the elite members of CP9 into cripples, and even Rob Luki had 2 fingers cut off. But in the eyes of Akainu, Loya was like that at that time. But who would have thought that in just over a year, the other party has grown to such a degree? More importantly, he still exists in the Kuzan family. Among the 3 generals, Akainu is undoubtedly the most ambitious. Although he is extremely cruel and believes in absolute justice, even civilians can kill without hesitation. But no one has to admit that he is a real soldier. As a soldier, his greatest wish is to clear all the troubles in this world. This is not something that a general can do. Therefore, the throne of the Admiral of the Navy has always been the goal of Akainu. He also wants to be at the center of the world's power like the former Admiral Cyborg Kong, and change the world with his own ideas. This ideal seems naive, even stupid. But Akainu really thought so. Now, with Sengoku getting older, it's very likely that he will resign in the last few years. At that time, the person who stands in front of Akainu and prevents him from becoming the new admiral is most likely Kuzan. Loya's growing strength not only brought confidence to the Navy and Sengoku to maintain the security of the world's oceans, but also brought enough confidence to the Kuzan family. It is conceivable that with the existence of 2 generals, Kuzan will be a great help when he competes for the position of marshal in the future. Army, heart, people, will. These 4 words are not enough to say, even if the top government of the world will still be like the original, most people choose him as the new admiral. But in the face of the soldier's mood, which can almost be said to be resentful, I am afraid that the candidate will also be reconsidered. But don't underestimate the prestige of the admiral in the Navy, or even in the world. Loya and Kuzan stand together because of this confidence. Moreover, Akainu's reputation among the current naval soldiers. Not to mention, the Navy is the messenger of justice. Because of the order, they will kill, even ordinary people. Because they are soldiers, they are soldiers. Soldiers, it is their duty to obey orders. But they will never kill ordinary people with their own personal judgment. This goes against their beliefs that they have always believed in. It is not an exaggeration to say that a butcher is an executioner. So Akainu is very worried now. Once the news spreads that Loya already has the power of a general, how powerful the prestige of the Kuzan family will be. So, dong dong dong, the sound of the door knocking alarmed Akainu, who was sitting on his knees in the room. He raised his head and said slowly, "Come in." "Excuse me." Accompanied by 2 steady voices, the shoji painted with purple roses was gently pulled away from the outside. 2 figures stepped in and saluted Akainu. "General Akainu, I heard that you have something to do with us." The 2 were Vice Admiral of the Navy headquarters, Ghost Spider and Doberman, both of whom belonged to the hawkish navy of the Akainu family. Seeing them, Akainu's heart relaxed a little. In case the 2 meet in the battle for the position of marshal in the future, although Kuzan has Loya's support, his confidence is not weak. And they are in the Navy. Connections and prestige are not the only indicators for determining a position, but there is a credit. This time Sengoku explained the task. Akainu is ready to go all out to maximize the military exploits. "Sit down, I have something to talk to you about," Akainu said with a calm expression. Ghost Spider and Doberman looked at each other and sat down bewildered. Soon, a servant silently served tea to the 3 of them, and then quickly left the room. In fact, Loya is not as sure as Akainu's performance about Kuzan being the marshal. Indeed, because of his existence, Kuzan will have a great help in the competition in the future, but you can't help people who don't have that interest. In the original book, Kuzan didn't want to be a marshal. If it weren't for the fact that most of the world government's upper echelons agreed with Akainu to be the marshal, Aokiji couldn't understand Akainu's style, and the ghosts were willing to fight with Akainu. The position of the marshal requires decisiveness and choice. Once accepted, it means that a lot of troubles need to be decided by him. This is completely contrary to his lazy view of justice. With Kuzan's temperament, he wants to be a marshal to hell. Of course, at the moment, Roha still doesn't know Akainu's careful thoughts. He is now busy drinking with Kuzan and dealing with the waves of fierce attacks. Well, question attack. Drake, did Jones take it away? The high wall of the arena behind the fortress was where Hansa once lost to Loya. Kuzan sat here cross-legged, holding a wine glass, and asked softly. Cough, cough, cough. Beside him, Loya, who heard the question, almost stumbled and fell from the wall, choked the air pipe with a sip of wine, and coughed non-stop. Kuzan just waited so quietly for Loya to perform, until Loya himself felt that he couldn't stop coughing, and then continued to say, "You don't have to be so nervous, Loya. I can see from your eyes that you did nothing against us." Quote. Suck. Taking the sake in the cup into his mouth, feeling the faint and smooth taste, Kuzan's expression was calm. "Actually, I found out half a year ago that Jones is not dead. But I asked Mr. Zephyr first, he just like you, didn't say anything. I knew from then on that you were hiding something from me." "You said I was right, Loya." "Half a year ago." Loya shook his head with a wry smile, but he still underestimated Kuzan's intelligence network. "Half a year ago, in the questioning after the master and apprentice confrontation, I thought that after so long, Kuzan would not care about it anymore." Unexpectedly, before he asked himself, he even asked Zephyr. If it's just Loya, then Kuzan can still explain the fact that Jones is still alive with the willfulness of young people, but when it comes to Zephyr, things will not be so simple. Zephyr is an old-fashioned Navy. Unlike a young man like Loya, he knows his identity better and what he should do. Since Zephyr refused to explain the reason, Kuzan could naturally detect the problem. This is also the reason why he has never mentioned this matter for the second time in half a year. He will bring it up today. Probably, there are various considerations. Thinking of this, Loya looked up at Kuzan and smiled. So, do you want to hear it? Teacher Kuzan. Chapter 304 shown a face. Confessing to Kuzan was actually not as difficult as Loya imagined. Maybe it was because he believed in Kuzan, or maybe it was because he wasn't sure how much he knew. However, when he told Kuzan all the plans and the process, he immediately felt a lot easier. It was as if the 10,000-ton boulder was being lifted up by someone. Well, why not throw it away? That's because what Loya told Kuzan was the same as what he told Zephyr, and the goal was directly at Shichibukai. In other words, his plan to overthrow the Tianlong people is still hidden in his heart. Make Jones the strongest Shichibukai who is completely under the command of the Navy, and then use this to overthrow the system of Shichibukai. Holding the wine glass, Kuzan took a sip, hiccup. I have to say, you are so bold, Loya. Bold. You do not say. Sengoku used the serious 5 words, to be our enemy, to warn Loya at the beginning, which is enough to show the boldness of this plan. No matter how Chi Wuhai accepts the identity given by the world government, it cannot erase the essence of them being a group of great pirates. As a navy, trying to create a Chiwahai and trying to overthrow the Chiwahai system is simply daring. Once exposed, it is not an exaggeration to say that Loya is a traitor to the Navy. In this regard, Loya had to smile bitterly. Forced by the situation, I can't help myself. Loya's decision to make this decision was not on a whim, burying the real plan for himself. At that time, the hatred of the Athos family towards him was well known. If he hadn't completed the assassination mission on Crispia Island, the ending that awaited him would not have been any better than the group of arrested pirates. Sengoku can't keep him either. To know that the reason why Sengoku can become a marshal is because he is loyal enough to the world government, it can be learned from the sun and the moon. At the same time, this is also his responsibility, as the so-called butt determines the head, nothing more than that. Facing the oppression from the Tianlong people, Loya will definitely be traded out. Also known as the abandoned child. So at that time, Loya was thinking, since you will never let me go, why can't I find a way back for myself and have to wait for you to make moves step by step? As a result, Jones's life was naturally saved. As Loya's backhand, he lurks on Turtle Island. Even now that the Assos family has been destroyed, Loya can't guarantee that he is safe. It can be seen from the fact that an entire family can be thrown to divert firepower and confess to the 5 old stars. It can be seen that immortality, but many Tianlong people have participated in it. Maybe the other party is afraid of his own reputation and dare not do it, but maybe he will release a fatal blow when he relaxes a little. At that time, if you wanted to protect yourself by relying solely on the relationship with the Navy, it would be really stupid to ultimate. Kuzan could roughly guess Loya's thoughts, but he didn't say much. He silently poured the last bit of sake from the porcelain bottle into the glass, and sipped it. Some words, Kuzan did not forget. Loya once said that Teacher Zephyr will not suffer in hatred. Kuzan listened to the truth of what the guy next to him said. But what's the harm? Loya is still the Lieutenant General of the headquarters, the rookie who has become famous in the Navy in the past 2 years, and the ice dragon Loya that he is familiar with. That's enough. So, he drank the cup and put it away silently. Then he stood up and waved at Loya. Well, since Teacher Zephyr and Marshal Sengoku are involved, I won't say much. With your kid's head, you should know the danger better than me. Teacher, I can only say one word to you. Kuzan looked at Loya lightly, with a smile on the corner of his mouth. Be careful with everything. Huh, Loya looked at Kuzan inexplicably. He thought that after he finished speaking, he would be greeted by Kuzan's familiar violent pheasant mouth. I didn't expect Kuzan to pat his butt so calmly, ready to leave. After Kuzan finished speaking, he jumped down from the wall and waved away. Loya buckled the back of his head and said to himself, "Looks like, I really don't have time to rest now. Hey, it turns out that the Lieutenant General is so tired." A week later, the Navy headquarters, the Marshal's office. Only a week later, the giants of the Navy gathered again. It's just different from the seriousness and caution last time. This time, everyone's faces are undoubtedly ugly. Well, that's a black thing that's screwed up. Among them, the red dog is the most. The complexion on his face was already dark, but at this moment, he was holding his chest with his face on his back, and there was black hair under his skin. Except for Garp, who was still eating senbei, the expressions of the others were not much better. Even Kazuna was a little less wretched. His expression was comparable to that of Shampoo when he played against Rayleigh on the ground, and there was a bit of coldness in his wretchedness. But it's not surprising that there is this scene. Anyone who is shown by Drago Snakeskin will not feel good in his heart. Right, that's right. Drago showed the faces of the big guys present. Loya sat upright beside Kuzan, looking like a standard soldier, with a straight waist. But the expression on his face betrayed him. He looked at the faces of the people around him with interest. He just wanted to laugh, but he didn't dare. But anyway, now that everyone is there, the meeting has to start. So, Sengoku coughed twice and opened the meeting. Ahem. That is to say, apart from some unimportant little pawns who spread ideas, haven't we gained anything this time? It's okay if I don't say this, but when I say it, Akainu's face stinks even more. A pair of beaded eyes is extremely fierce, as if to choose someone to devour. Who would have thought that Drago would be so cunning? After knowing that the Admiral of the Navy was dispatched, combined with the situation he encountered, he quickly judged the plan of the Navy, and directly ordered the people at each station to abandon all plans and chose to evacuate. To say that at the speed of the warship, it is inevitable to catch up with these fleeing silencer troops. But if you are chasing in the wrong direction, the faster the warship is, the result is that Vietnam is completely different. Even as an opponent, Loya had to applaud Drago. This one-handed car insurance is simply beautiful. Those who were reported by the local eyeliner under the banner of the silenced army were actually all the nationals they temporarily incorporated locally. The real silenced soldiers waited for Akainu and Kayabu to chase them out, and then they left by boat one by one. And even if they catch those guys who are willing to attract firepower to the silencer soldiers, they can't do anything to them. After all, they are other people's citizens. They were bewitched and asked the Navy to let them go. Do you think Sengoku will let them go? You can't just sentence the other party to death just because the other party is just helping the silencer military perform a play, right? It is better to say that it is not a member country of the world government, and it is directly thrown into the prison to sober up. But those countries that belong to the world government, their opinions cannot be ignored. Just before the meeting, someone from the world government came to express the 5 old stars' dissatisfaction with the Navy's random arrests, saying that this is not conducive to world peace. Sengoku said, "What can I do? I am also very disappointed." Even those guys who were finally determined to be silencers, soldiers actually existed at the level of squad leaders. For a guy of this status, if you don't catch 18 million, it will not be a loss to the silencer army at all. Maybe it can be promoted by Drago as a martyr model, which is inspiring. To sum up, it is no wonder that Akainu's face is so ugly. He finally had an opportunity to accumulate a lot of military merit, but it was destroyed by Drago's beautiful counterattack. He can still laugh at the ghost. Chapter 305 Success. Fail. You can't say the same thing, Sengoku. Although this mission didn't achieve the planned effect, it can't be called a success, but it can't be called a failure. Admiral Suru explained to Sengoku, resting his chin in his hand, "At least we can now. To be sure, the places we suspected before were the strongholds of the silencer army. And those places that are now abandoned by them, it is no longer possible to continue to serve them. From this point of view, we still win. Quote. And what we paid was just an emergency order to let all the branches on the route cooperate with the arrest, and let the two generals of Sakazuki go out to sea. The other party gave up a large piece of the paved territory. Ah, is that so? Sengoku seemed a little lost, clasping the back of his head, looking very embarrassed. But soon, he turned around. Grabbing the silencer army has never been the Navy's own business. Perhaps because of Drago, the Navy will pursue them with all their might. But it cannot be denied that the world government really hates it. Because they are different from pirates, their goal is clear from the beginning, and their real goal is to overthrow the world government. Now that so many strongholds and bases have been discovered by the Navy, it is funny that the world government has nothing to do. It is conceivable that those countries that have accommodated or accepted the silenced army will definitely not have a better life in the future. The unlucky non-joined country may be regarded as the chicken that kills the chicken to warn the monkeys, and it will be slaughtered by the other monkey countries. The reason why the world government will express dissatisfaction with the Navy is that they are afraid to take action, so as not to disturb their next plans. It can be seen that this mission is indeed not a failure. At least in the first half of the Great Route, the Silencer Army has been unable to make any major disturbances for a few years. Moreover, it can be seen from Drago's response that the group of cadres from various regions who followed him to the sea at that time were really as Loya said, and they were seriously injured. In the feedback from the branches below, the Silencer Army did not even pull up a decent counterattack. In the face of the sudden attack of the Navy, the whole was beaten in a circle. The group of dragons has no leader, and this is the case. But speaking of it, I met a strange guy on the way back. Kizaru suddenly said with a wretched expression, how should I say it? Although he feels familiar to me, the other party should be, silence the army is right. Speaking of this, Kizaru turned his attention to Loya, that is a murloc. If you change the color of the opponent's skin, he is exactly the same as the murloc Haku in the Silence Army. However, the opponent uses the power of, turned out to be frozen. What do you think about this matter? Lieutenant General Loya. Frozen. The rest of the bosses raised their heads when they heard Kizaru's words and looked at Loya and Kuzan. There have never been two identical devil fruits at the same time in history, Kuzan and Loya. One is a natural frozen fruit person, and the other is a rare beast with the ice dragon fruit ability. This is already the case. A rare coincidence. And what Kizaru said just now, there is also a person with ice attribute ability in the Silencer Army. What's happening here? Also, what does it mean to feel familiar to him? To be able to let Kizaru say this, it is estimated that the other party is referring to Loya, who once injured Kizaru in the death battle in prison. Thinking of this, Sengoku frowned and asked, Loya, do you know what's going on? Well, Loya pursed her cheeks and suddenly smiled freely, although it's a bit unexpected, but I really know it very well. Loya, you. Just as Kuzan was about to say something, Loya stopped him with his eyes. Afterwards, he looked calmly at the big guys present, and said, this is the reason why I can guarantee that Drago is currently incapable of being cloned, that Murloc, if nothing else, should be the Silencer Army. A test subject that I stamped on. Test item. Sengoku asked curiously, what the hell did you do to them? That's right, do you know how much trouble a Murloc can use to freeze without being restrained by the seawater? Yellow Ape added woefully beside him. To everyone's scrutiny, Loya didn't panic, and explained the reason generously. That's a new move of mine. It injects the power of the ice dragon into the opponent's body, creating a false ice dragon power, and letting the opponent use my power. But, without waiting for Sengoku to continue speaking, Loya grinned and said with a sinister smile, it is not without cost to want to use this power. Because it belongs to me, the power of the ice dragon cannot be supplemented from outside. So if they want to use this power, if you want to continue to use this power, you need to draw your own life anytime and anywhere as fuel. Quote. Originally, I thought it would take at least 2 or 3 months for them to get up from the bed. It seems that I misestimated the physique of the Murloc family, but I didn't expect him to get out of bed so quickly. But it doesn't matter, the more this power is used, the faster he will die. Chi 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 chi. Loya smiled sinisterly and asked all the bigwigs present. A silence army who hides in the dark and doesn't know how long he can live. And one who hides in the dark, after the strength is strengthened, the silencer army can only live for 3 years at most. Which one will you choose as your opponent? Quote. After listening to Loya's answer, the conference room suddenly fell into silence. This news seems to be a bit important. Not only Sengoku, but also the always calm Crane and Garp, who has never had anything to do with himself, stopped breathing at this moment. According to Loya, those guys who have been fighting with him and others for more than 10 years have only 3 years to live. They can't say what's in their hearts, are they lucky? Or sad? Nobody made it clear, but looking at Loya's swearing appearance, it is estimated that this news was not made indiscriminately. After a long time, Garp, who had the most peculiar brain circuit, broke the tranquility and said with emotion, how can ice-type power still be used like this? What do you think of Kuzan? I sit and watch. Facing Garp's rambling words, Kuzan didn't bother to answer, and silently pulled down his blindfold. Awakened by Garp's words, Sengoku touched the back of the goat beside his feet and asked earnestly, are you really sure that they only have 3 years? Faced with Sengoku's question, Loya didn't speak, suddenly turned his hand and fired a Jinchuriki column of ice, catching a bird that flew past the window. Holding the bird in one hand, Loya wrote and drew on the bird's back with the other. Along with the shrill screams, a blue pattern slowly appeared on the bird's back. After completing this, Loya threw the bird on the table and said to Sengoku, I'm sure. Chapter 306 Crazy Bird. With the magic circle in Roha's eyes and the ghosts in the eyes of Sengoku and others completed, the blue pattern on the bird's back suddenly lit up, and then gradually disappeared into its body. Clang. With Loya still on the table, the fluffy little guy became extremely stiff at the moment, and it was like a piece of wood when he hit the table. Seeing this, Garp got down on his knees, poked at the thing that was suspected to be an ice sculpture in front of him, and asked suspiciously, then what? What do you want to prove with this? I advise you to keep your hands away, Mr. Garp. Loya reminded Garp aloud, this thing can bite. Just as he was talking, the bird on the table that seemed to have been frozen to death a second ago suddenly opened his eyes, fluttered his wings and got up, opening his mouth and biting at Garp's finger. Bite. It's just this little. Wow, it's very dangerous, and I almost got bitten. Garp was talking, just in time for the bird's raid. Fortunately, he is not asleep now, otherwise there will be another bird king in this world besides Axemonka. Quickly retracting his hand, Garp stared blankly at the bird in front of him. This little guy, so fast. In the sneak attack just now, the speed of this ordinary little bit who can't be more ordinary is beyond Garp's imagination. It was difficult for him to understand what Roha had done to the bird to allow a bird to explode with such speed. At this moment, Roha explained in a timely manner, in order to show you the effect, the power of the ice dragon I injected into it exceeds the limit it can withstand. The effect of this is that its physical quality will become more than 10 times higher than its peers, but correspondingly, its life is only a few minutes left. Quote. In fact, as Loya said, without biting Garp, the reinforced bird quickly got up from the table, aimed at Garp and continued to open its mouth. But this time I'm not going to bite him. I saw a blue ice Jinchuriki column suddenly spit out of its mouth and shoot straight at Garp. Hearing Loya's words, Garp had already paid more attention to it. Seeing this scene, what I didn't even think about was a backhand slap. Crack, bang. The ice Jinchuriki column hit Garp's palm and broke in two. Then, Garp's broad palm drew an arc in the air and landed heavily on it. Bastard, what do I have a grudge against you? Why do I have to trouble you? Garp roared so sharply Kiba. Looking at the lump that flew quickly across the table, Loya reached out and grabbed it lightly, holding it in his hand. According to normal circumstances, after being slapped by Garp, the bird will be disabled even if it doesn't die. But in Loya's hands, it was still struggling with energy. And along with its movement, the ice Jinchuriki column was sprayed out indiscriminately, making noise all over the floor. Seeing this scene, Sengoku looked serious and asked seriously, "Loya, do you also have this kind of boosting effect on the mark of the silencer army? Is it possible for our soldiers to use this as well? How durable can a bird be?" But after being engraved by Loya, what the other party showed really shocked Sengoku. If those guys in the silencer army who are already extraordinary in strength get this kind of boost, will it become more difficult? Let's not mention for the time being, as a naval marshal, Sengoku immediately thought of using this thing to improve the combat strength of the navy. However, Loya didn't want to use this on his colleagues. Because of the imprint of the enemy of living beings, the increased strength is only incidental, and its more terrifying effect is so inhuman. Immediately, Loya shook his head. "Don't rush to make a decision, just continue reading it." "Well." Sengoku nodded and did not continue speaking. Just as the two of them were communicating, the bird suddenly slowed down. Feeling the abnormality in his palm, Loya naturally understood what happened. Putting the bird on the table, Loya shrugged at Sengoku. "That's why I'm reluctant to imprint my colleagues, because it's so inhumane." Under the gaze of a group of Navy bosses, the crazy bird was dying at this moment, its mouth open weakly. Its feathers fell off quickly, revealing a shriveled body with blue lines underneath. Then, in the shocked eyes of a group of people, the whole bird began to shrink. It's like a deflated balloon, it's just a breath of time, and the mellow bird just now turned into a layer of shell. No one could have come up with a better adjective at the moment, especially when Garp punctured the bird-shaped shell and found that the internal organs were huddled together and there was nothing else. If according to Sengoku's idea, put this dangerous mark on the Navy officers, it is conceivable that in the days to come, layers of human shells will become the unique landscape of the Navy. This method of death is undoubtedly difficult to accept. In Loya's words, it is very inhumane. Take a look at everyone's expressions. Loya calmly picked up the empty shell from a table of bird feathers and played with it in the palm of his hand. This is for demonstration, so the characteristics brought by the effect are accelerated. However, the senior cadres of the Silence Army are different. Their own strength does not allow me to penetrate the power that can produce such an effect. 3 years is just a guaranteed period of time. Some people may use my power often and cannot survive for a year. It is also possible that they would rather die than touch this power for a single cent. In that case, they can survive in 5 years. After Loya finished speaking, he suddenly pointed to the information in Sengoku's hand and said with a smile, "But anyway, this is our chance, isn't it?" Indeed, this is an opportunity. With this unsightly side effect in it, Sengoku gave up the idea of having Loya promote the mark in the Navy without even thinking about it. The current situation is that the Silence military has been marked on a large scale, which is of great significance to the Navy. Immediately, Sengoku stood up and arranged. "That's right, this is an opportunity. Crane, come and see if we can do this." Seeing that Sengoku was no longer entangled in the issue of the Murloc Haku, Kizaru pursed his mouth wryly, and said to Roha, "Luo Yasong, if the other party keeps using this power, is it possible to live for a long time?" Well, this situation cannot be completely denied. Loya touched his chin. "If you want to use the power of the ice dragon, you must burn your own vitality. It cannot be ruled out that there is a kind of huge vitality that recovers quickly. Guys, let the recovery keep up with the drain." Quote. Doesn't that mean that for that kind of person, this is a good thing at all? Hearing Kizaru's question, Loya raised his eyebrows and grinned. "Huh. Good thing. Although I can't control the mark remotely, as long as I stand in front of me, the mark can be controlled by me. I don't think it's a good thing for anyone to live in control for a lifetime, right?" Chapter 307 Strange News. The meeting continued from the morning to the beginning of the lights, when Sengoku announced its dissolution. I have to admit that Loya's mark is still somewhat useful. If the life force consumed is not so terrifying, large-scale arrangements are not difficult. However, even in this situation, this capability is one of the Navy's cards. At some point, this thing will undoubtedly be the winner. Of course, this matter still needs to be discussed in the long run, and a specific process needs to be decided, which is not used yet. When leaving, Loya took the bird's dry mukuro and kabuto with him. It wasn't because of his conscious habit of packing the garbage away, or because he was afraid of making Sengoku unhappy, but because later, another role of the enemy of living things would be revealed. The enemy of life is not a parasitic version of the ice bomb. The two look similar, but the purpose of being created is not at all handed over. He's not stupid, it's not the time to expose this kind of thing. Back in the courtyard, Loya and Aludo said hello, asked someone to bring some food, then went to his room and took out the bird. If there are outsiders here, it is estimated that they will be startled by the things in Loya's hands. Because the little bird that had swelled up again at some point was missing more than half of its head, staring at its dark eyes and cooing non-stop. Except for Loya, no one knows what kind of power is supporting this corpse. After carefully inspecting the bird, Loya let it go with a heart hanging on it. He put the bird on the table, picked up the apple on the side and gnawed it, with a satisfied smile on his face. As expected, when the life force is completely consumed, the force of death will quickly invade the body. Although the intensity is not very high, but I think that as long as it is alive, the stronger it is, the stronger the effect will be after it is transformed into the undead. Quote. That's right. Loya's purpose now is this. From the day the passive skill of the enemy of life appeared, he had questioned the identity of his ice dragon. Why is the ice dragon still involved in the power of death, and the calf is too far? Moreover, as the ice dragon slayer mage, if he has this characteristic, why was there no corresponding skill in the skill bar before? So Loya launched an investigation and exploration on this matter, and his efforts paid off, and he finally got a little bit of attention from him. If I guessed correctly, I shouldn't be a simple ice dragon. Edith can't communicate with him yet, so the name was thought up by Loya based on his own memory. That is, the Frost Dragon. Just like King Wu, who he used to be familiar with, the same terrifying one under the Lich King Arthas. Not only control the ice, but also control the shadow and death. I just don't know what's the difference between myself and those bones. Now Edith still can't communicate with him, so Loya can't confirm this guess. But this did not prevent him from developing this power. If he was afraid of the terrible consequences he would have after using it, he would just let others try it. The imprint of the enemy of living beings is thus generated, and from the current performance, the effect is not bad. Cuckoo. The undead bird rubbed Loya's fingers affectionately, and a comfortable low voice sounded in his throat. As its creator, Loya controls everything and makes it feel very intimate. Facing the closeness shown by the undead bird, Loya smiled, put his index finger in front of it, and drew a circle. Hum. The magic power shook, and a silky white light belt was pulled out by Loya. Following his movements, the undead bird swayed around like he was drunk, and finally threw himself on the table. Soon, its body was shriveled again, but this time it was no longer a shell, but completely turned into powder. Using ice cubes to freeze the ashes into a ball, Loya played with this thing that could barely be called ashes. If I can directly convert the vitality into the undead power that the undead need, why would it be so troublesome now? Dong dong dong. The knock on the door alarmed Loya. He looked at the door, and a familiar smell of meat floated in along the crack of the door. It was the food made by Ms. S, who had become the exclusive chef of the courtyard. Knowing that Loya eats a lot, the props for carrying the meals are not plates, but trailers. Smelling this smell, Loya suddenly laughed. Please come in. Time flies, time flies. It's been a while since the last meeting. A week. When Loya got up for lunch as usual, a phone bug interrupted his movement. It was a phone bug with a black outer shell. Compared with ordinary phone bugs, its size was a little smaller. But don't underestimate it because of this. Whether it is communication range or stability, it can throw off ordinary phone bugs. Good steel is used on a knife's edge, and so is this phone bug. After answering the call, Loya nibbled on the roast goat and asked casually, "Mr. Zephyr, how are your preparations? If you want to clean up Chihuahua, and you have to hide from the Navy bosses, there are too many things to prepare." In particular, Loya is going to give this credit to Jones, and the preparations in the early stage are naturally indispensable. He must return to the headquarters to resume his duties, then these things can only be handed over to Zephyr. As Loya expected, Zephyr called this time to inform Loya of the progress of these things. It's just that in addition to what it should have, Zephyr also brought a bad news to Loya. That is one of the 7 seas under the king, Moonlight Moria, who for the first time drove the terrifying Dao out of the foggy sea. And his target is the Turtle Island where Jones is. Why is Moria looking for Jones? Did they have any deep hatred? Loya forgot to spit out the bones frightened by the news, chewing and swallowing. And after he was defeated by Guy Duo, didn't he hide in the Misty Sea to prepare for revenge? What was the motivation behind him to leave there? Loya is really puzzled, although he doesn't know much about Moonlight Moria, judging from the performance in his original book. That's it. The 4 sovereigns are indeed terrifying. The sand crocodile defeated by Whitebeard, faced with the power of the natural disaster, even turned his mind on ancient weapons. It is conceivable how deep memory Whitebeard brought him. The same is true for Moria, but his plan is not to use ancient weapons, but to create an army of zombies through fruit power. The ghost knows what he thinks, but he pinned his hopes on the zombie with such obvious weakness. But being able to shrink in the Misty Sea day after day, year after year, shows that this person's patience is excellent. So Loya can't help but ask, is Moria drinking too much fake wine? He also left the foggy sea, what was he doing with Jones? Not to mention that he has a relationship with Hunter Jones, the former giant of the Dark World, and the news that Jones is still alive is only 2 slaps. And excluding Jones' identity, is Mariah's target Turtle Island? That is, the famous cannibal island outside. Hey, this joke is getting bigger. Could it be that Oz the Devil can't satisfy Mariah, so he wants to find a bigger zombie? Chapter 308 Mariah's Ambition. Thinking of this, Loya said his own question. And Zephyr's answer to him made him narrow his eyes. Oh, is there such a thing? It turns out that the source of the matter has to start from when Jones first went to sea. At that time, Jones accepted Loya's order to find the location of the mechanical island in the sea. The body of the mechanical island is just a huge tortoise, not marked by any record pointer, so even though Loya has described it in great detail, Jones is still confused and can only find the sea. There is nothing Loya can do about this, he can only say that it is random. From the G9 branch, Jones was able to call and tell himself that it was a success, which was actually a bit of a surprise to Loya. On the way to find the mechanical island, Jones inadvertently came to the Devil's Triangle in the foggy sea and boarded the horror bark. That day, Jones held a turtle, lowered his IQ to the same level as him and communicated for a long time, and came to a conclusion. This area is likely to be the location of the mechanical island. Because the turtle said that there was a moving island nearby, and combined with the information given by Loya, Jones did not consider it carefully because he lowered his somewhat insufficient IQ, so he regarded the island mentioned by the turtle as a mechanical island. That was also the first time Jones and Mariah and others met. As his IQ gradually recovered, Jones also found that something was not quite right. Machinery Island is a fertile island, and the residents on it live and work in peace and contentment. No matter how you look at it, it shouldn't be such a dilapidated scene in front of you. Looking around, there are hideous trees and cemeteries everywhere. In this scene, Jones expressed his doubts about whether there were any living people on the island. But soon he knew the answer. Because he met one of Moria's 3 weirdos, Absalom, a Superman with the ability of transparent fruit. Jones' body has been deformed with constant use, and it has already tasted a bit of a beast. Even without his eyes and observation hockey, he could smell the other person's body odor. In the face of Absalom's sneak attack, it can be said that the ending was doomed from the very beginning. That's how things developed, and Abu Shalom was easily resolved. Jones suddenly remembered that Moonlight Moria, one of the 7 seas under the king, seemed to be hiding in a foggy sea. Judging from the threats that Absalom released before he fell into a coma, it seemed that this place was Mariah's territory. I came here to find Mechanic Island, but I couldn't make it against Mariah. And because of Loya's order, he had to honestly hide his identity to avoid being discovered. So Jones was ready to go back to the boat on the spot and leave this ghost place. It's a pity that Mariah is not ready to leave him just like that. Through the report of the zombies, Moria knew that there was an intruder on the ship. For such a powerful guy, Mariah, who is preparing an army of zombies, has always had only 2 solutions. 1. Leave the body behind. 2. Leave the shadow behind. Of course he didn't know that his opponent was the hunter, Jones, who is famous in the dark world, otherwise he wouldn't make such a mindless decision. So, in the face of Moria leading the army of zombies to intercept him, the impatient Jones directly transformed into a huge sea king, and set off waves to fight back against Moria. Later, Jones won, of course, and left the dread bark unscathed. But he didn't expect how shocked the defeated Moria was at that time. Seeing with his own eyes an ordinary human being transformed into a huge sea king, this left a deep impression on Mariah. For a long time, Moria's trump card was the frozen demon Oz, but because he couldn't find a suitable shadow, he couldn't form a fighting force. Now he has finally found a suitable target, and that is Jones. No one is more familiar with how to control a gigantic body than a human who can gigantic. For his own ambition, Moria vowed to get Jones' shadow. This is also the main reason why he is willing to leave the Devil's Triangle Sea. As long as the goal is achieved, he can not only obtain a shadow that satisfies him, but also obtain a fighter with extraordinary strength. Of course, this is also the reason why Jones did not show too much strength. Just turning into a sea king to escape, let Moria seriously underestimate Jones' strength. This is where things should have ended. Even if Mariah will trouble Jones in the future, there is no need for Zephyr to call specifically at this moment. It's not that they are arrogant, it's just a Mariah. After knowing the characteristics of the opponent's fruit ability, it can be solved casually. And because of its own concealment, whether the other party can find it is still a problem. But who would have thought that Moria's pursuit would come so fast? Not only is it very certain that Jones is on the Cannibal Island, but even the position of the Cannibal Island is clear, and the direction is not different from where he is. Thinking that something was wrong, Jones told Zephyr what he found. And at the same time, he sent his subordinates to investigate the situation many times, and finally came to the conclusion that Moria really came for him. Because the other party's attitude was very arrogant, every time the spies sent out to catch Jones would let them leave alive. And let them speak, let them tell Jones that he brought a big gift to visit him this time. God's gift. If you know Lao Tzu's true identity, I bet you won't be able to run for 50 cents. Hunter, Jones was not blown out of his mouth, but was piled up by the corpses of countless challengers, Mukuro. Mariah Jones might have taken a more serious look when he was young, but now Mariah. However, how to solve this matter still needs Loya to speak. If he doesn't agree, Jones doesn't mind playing with each other. Island turtles are not slow creatures. When there is no ocean current to borrow, its speed is absolutely amazing in order to find new ocean currents. After listening to Zephyr's description, Loya frowned, picked up the napkin beside him and wiped his fingers. He didn't care what Mariah thought, a waste who should have been eliminated but was reluctant to leave. However, the other party was able to find the trace of Jones, which made Loya express that it was very strange. Not to mention that he is relying on the zombies under his command, just those stinky guys. Jones can smell it from a few kilometers away. If Mariah can find Jones through unknown means, does that mean that Jones' situation is actually not as safe as he thinks? If the situation is true, it is very likely that many people are now staring closely at Jones, preparing for a shady purpose. And the news that he is still alive may have been leaked out. Chapter 309 Flying Squirrel. So, what are we going to do? Zephyr asked with a frown. Their target had already been set to be the sand crocodile, and Moria's foot in it now makes them seem a little passive. Well, holding his chin, Loya thought about this question carefully. Moria would suddenly leave the Devil's Triangle Sea, which was indeed beyond his expectations. However, it is not a solution to allow the other party to chase after him so arrogantly. Jones can't be exposed yet, and it will be after he completes the layout. At that time, even if he was held accountable by the world government, he could rely on the backhand left behind to avoid pursuit and live swaggeringly. After thinking about it, Loya felt that it was more in his own interest to let Jones hide. So he calmed down and said to Zephyr, Morlia's departure from the Devil's Triangle must have been taken by the Navy Master. If it continues, Jones will be in danger of being exposed in advance. Well, let Jones avoid him first. I'll see how Marshal Sengoku and the others decide, and if I can, I'll take care of him myself. How many years has Moria been in the Devil's Triangle? Suddenly leaving today, Sengoku must send someone to investigate and monitor this matter. If the task did not fall on the head of some idle and boring guy, then it is estimated that Loya's did not run. Zephyr understood this, and replied, that's fine. I'm following the merchant ship heading for Alabasta. I won't be able to leave for a while. If you don't have a chance by then, let Jones handle it himself. The two briefly exchanged a few words about this matter, and then they began to discuss the specific reasons for getting rid of the sand crocodile in the rest of the time. At the same time, in the capital of Alabasta, in the basement of the casino rain banquet, K. Rockdar felt inexplicably heart palpitations. In recent days, he is very satisfied with the development of Bar Rock Works. Whether it's raising funds to buy dance fans or building an image among the general population of Alabasta, there is a welcome trend. K. Rockdal has a hunch that within 3 years at most, he will be able to start a war that will subvert the country. At that time, as the hero of the kingdom, he can easily overthrow the kingship of Cobra, so as to find the information of the ancient weapon Pluto. This should have been something to be happy about, but for unknown reasons, the sand crocodile couldn't laugh at the moment. However, he did not behave abnormally. He bit his cigar and asked indifferently, is the shipment ready last time? During this time, the Navy's attention has been on those monkeys. We have to take good care of it. Take this opportunity, quote, to be able to come to this secret basement, in addition to K. Rockdal himself, is naturally the son of the devil, Nicole Robin. After listening to Rockdale's question, Robin slowly closed the book, supported his chin with one hand, and moved elegantly and maturely, revealing an intellectual beauty. Yes, it's ready. However, Mr. One sent back a message earlier. Because of the naval action, they had to change their course, and it took a few more days to bring the things back. Other than that, everything was as originally planned. Plan to proceed. Quote. Speaking of this, Robin seemed to think of something and smiled slightly, but speaking of the Silencer Army, I recently heard an interesting piece of news. Oh, what is it? K. Rockdale raised his eyelids and asked without changing his face. When the Navy was hunting down criminals before, they didn't even pull out a decent counterattack. Later, the intelligence officers said that it was because their cadres suffered heavy losses in the battle with the ice dragon Loya. At this point, Robin's expression became very strange. There were some doubts, but more of surprise. Can he do such a thing alone? Then how much has the power of the Navy swelled now? Robin is someone who knows what the words, Lieutenant General, stand for, as evidenced by the tragedy of O'Hara. Especially Kuzan, who was still a lieutenant general at the time, left an indelible memory on her. But the other party is the Silencer Army that is causing headaches for the governments of the world. How did the new lieutenant general named Loya do it? Moreover, according to the gossip, the other party defeated all of them in front of Drago, and finally left gracefully. I have to say that Robin admires Sand Crocodile's decisiveness very much at this moment. If he continued to deal with Loya with a vengeance before, then their ending would be self-evident. What about the King's Chiwahai? Robin would not be naive to think that a Kibukai name can keep K-Rochdal and let the monster Lieutenant General not take action on him. Krokdar also thought of this. He silently exhaled a smoke ring, and sneered, "No matter how he did it, it has nothing to do with us. Since the Navy wants to find trouble with the Silencer army, then let them continue to fight. As long as we get Pluto, no matter if it's the Navy or the Silencer army, there's nothing I can do." For the power of ancient weapons, K-Rochdal is very convinced. The trace of throbbing in the bottom of his heart also easily collapsed in front of this powerful confidence. In this regard, Robin glanced at him quietly, without disturbing him. The authorities are fascinated by the bystanders. Although he has always had a close relationship with this dangerous guy, Robin can be considered to understand his character. Even he didn't realize that when he mentioned Loya, his eyes and small movements showed his unease. Indeed, no one can take it lightly in the face of the new Navy, who has an amazing record. No, a terrifying record. But K-Rochdal's performance was a little too excited. But Robin didn't say much, anyway. It has nothing to do with her, doesn't it? When the time came to afternoon, Loya finally waited for Sengoku's summons. The news of the Navy also takes time. Moria left the Devil's Triangle Sea a few days ago. To receive the news so quickly, the efficiency of the Navy is already good. This time the call is not as big as before. After all, it is just a Mariah, and it is not the time for a general-level existence to take action against him. But considering the identity of the other party Kibukai, Sengoku will find several lieutenant generals of the headquarters. As soon as he entered the door, Loya got to know Moxigan and greeted the purple-haired Flying Squirrel. "Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, long time no see." Hearing the movement, the Flying Squirrel, who was talking to Huo Shaoshan, turned his head, stared at Loya for a few seconds, and then pretended not to see it, and continued to chat with Huo Shaoshan. The corner of Loya's mouth twitched when he saw this scene, and he didn't know what to say. "Wasn't that the last time I chased Drake and swallowed your supplies? This is a special case for me, a privilege issued by Sengoku. Besides, how old are you? How dare you care about this junior like me?" Huo Shaoshan still looks like a good old man, but being sandwiched between the two of them, his kind-hearted smile can't help but be a little embarrassed. Fortunately, Sengoku stood up to relieve him. When Loya arrived, the number of people arrived. After coughing twice, Sengoku looked at the quiet Navy's backbone, and said slowly, "Then, the meeting begins." Chapter 310 Kuzan Night Visit. So, being a marshal is really not an easy job. How many times has Sengoku held meetings since Loya came back? If Kuzan is willing to suffer from this, it's hell. The reason for this meeting is nothing more than about Moria's movements. To be honest, the departure of Moria, the current Shichibukai, will allow Sengoku to hold a serious meeting to discuss. There is no reason for him, and if something goes wrong, there must be a demon. After Moria became Chiwahai, he was a standard dead fat house, no mistake. Nested in the Devil's Triangle waters for many years, he did not move for a while, and single-mindedly fiddled with his own zombie army. Even K-Rochdal, who also lived in the same place, would wander around the sea for a while to help Alabasta clean up the pirates or something. He was fine, stayed there and never showed up again. If it wasn't for Shang, the standard naval, lacking dog, who went out for a walk from time to time, no one would know whether Mariah was dead or alive. The result is such a dead fat house, and suddenly one day left his kennel, which made Sengoku very surprised. Although he didn't drive his terrifying three-masted sailing ship, it was just a normal sailing ship that allowed Sengoku to show the seriousness he should have. The main content of the meeting is to arrange personnel to investigate the situation. After all, the other party is the king under the Chiwahai, and together with the navy and the 4 emperors to maintain the balance of the Great Route, the attitude of the navy is not too strict. Sengoku considered it again and again, but agreed with Loya's self-recommendation. In all fairness, among the lieutenant generals present, he is still the strongest. After all, Mariah is a guy who can become Chiwahai. With him around, he can handle any emergencies very well. Well, as for why Loa is the strongest, that's because of course Garp's not there. It is said that he went to the East China Sea to perform a mission, and by the way, he went back to his hometown to do ideological work for his last grandson, and teach him to be a glorious naval soldier. Loya was looking forward to seeing Garp's confused expression after Luffy left the sea. In addition to Loa, the entourage of this mission also includes General Fire Yamanaka and Lieutenant General Dalmesia, who has the ability of the animal dog fruit Dalmatian form. 2 veteran lieutenant generals and Loya's safety device shot together. Sengoku believes that even if Moria really thinks carefully, it will inevitably end in failure. Of course, the premise is that Loya can listen to the command. In case he directly rushes up to roar and wash the ground, Sengoku will not be very good at explaining to the world government. As for the flying squirrel who has the best relationship with Roya, it is not because he is angry with Roya that he is unwilling to be with him, but because he has other tasks. This time the Navy is going to monitor Moria, and in order to avoid accidents, someone must always pay attention to the movements of the other Kibui. The remaining lieutenant generals need to be stationed in the headquarters to guard against danger. Then, please take care of me in the next time. Senior Huo Shaoshan, Senior Dalmesia. After the meeting, Loya and the 2 walked together, chatting and exchanging feelings. Looking at the giggling young man in front of him, Huo Shaoshan couldn't help but think of the scene where the 2 met for the first time on Heathville Island, and said with emotion, "Let you take care of us, Loya-kun. It's only been a year, I didn't expect you to grow up so fast. Compared to you, my senior is really dull." Quote. Dalmesia on the side nodded in agreement, recalling the scene of the death battle in Loya's prison, and said with affection, "It's fortunate that I didn't act as the gatekeeper for your 9th game at that time, otherwise I would definitely end up very badly. Miserable." Speaking of this, Lieutenant General Dalmesia stretched out the dog's claws that kept the orc form at all times, and put it on Loya's shoulder. "If there is any danger at that time, our 2 old fellows still need your help from Loya." Ha ha ha. The 3 of them talked and laughed, and gradually left the fortress. It's night, in the garden. Minnie came to Loya with a plate and asked, "This time, don't we have to come with you?" Others don't know, but Minnie is very clear. Since Sengoku didn't summon Loya alone, he naturally had to figure it out for Mariah to leave the Devil's Triangle Sea to the Cannibal Island. As Jones' sister, it's not that she doesn't trust Jones enough, but that she is a little flustered when it comes to her own relatives. Hearing Minnie's question, Loya put down his pot, picked up the unknown fruit in the fruit basket next to him and nibbled it, and replied, "You don't need to go. You're almost done resting during this time. I will let Marshal Sengoku make other arrangements for you." After a pause, Loya continued, "You can't be considered a qualified admiral without leading troops to fight alone. But don't worry too much. I don't know what Moria thinks, but there are 3 headquarters in the I don't think he's going to make a fuss about him." This is indeed a fact, and the Chiwahai is also divided into strong and weak. Moria's level might still be the weakest among the Chiwahai. It's not that Minnie looked down on him. As long as she was given some time to prepare, she would dare to confront Moria. The king's Chiwahai is so out of reach for ordinary pirates, and it has an absolute deterrent force for ordinary pirates. But for the monsters of the elite camp, this legend is just like that. Because they can be selected into the elite camp, their imaginary enemies are all those big pirates with a bounty of tens of millions. Although Moria is strong, they are not without a chance. Minnie did not comment on Loya's answer. She knew that as long as it was something decided by the guy in front of her, she would not accept the questioning of others. After quietly accompanying Loya to finish her dinner, Minnie stood up, said, "Good night," lightly, and left with a plate. Leaving Loya to continue wiping out the mountains of food there. It was not until the bright moon hung high that Loya stopped eating. Patting his stomach comfortably, Loya was content to go back to the house to sleep. However, he wanted to sleep, but someone was not going to let him sleep. Call out. Bang! Smashing the ice spear that suddenly flew, Roha turned his head and said helplessly to the figure on the wall, I don't sleep in the middle of the night, I will not talk about you running around in the headquarters. And attack me directly. Are all the generals so boring? Mr. Kuzan. Quote. Kuzan, with curly hair and a white shirt, came to Loya with a shave, raised his eyelids and said to him, I thought you should rest, and I was still thinking about whether to disturb you. Whoever thought, you are still eating after this order. Are you a pig? Haha, it's none of your business. Loya flipped the Byakugan and slapped it back unceremoniously. At this time, Aludo, who heard the movement, stuck his head out of his bedroom and asked sleepily, Loya, what's wrong? Nothing, you sleep with yours. After seeing Loya finish speaking, Aldo thumped and lay back again. Kuzan smacked his lips. You guys, it's really easy, Loya. Well, with me here after all, what do they need to worry about? Chapter 311 Familiar Feeling. No one knows exactly what Kuzan said to Loya last night, but those who are familiar with Loya know that when his expression is serious, he must be in a very bad mood after excluding the matter. So when Huo Shaoshan and Lieutenant General Dalmizha reunited with Loya at the port, the two couldn't help but glance at each other and discuss in a low voice. What's wrong with him? I don't know, and I don't want to know either. Loya is notoriously unreliable in the Navy. Considering his own ability to bear, the two tacitly decided that it is better to do more than one less thing. But the time is almost up. No matter what Loya's mood is, they must go. The sea area where Mariah is located is not too far from the naval headquarters, but because the other party is moving at a high speed and wants to check the situation, it is better for them to set off early. Thinking of this, Fire Yamanaka will shake his head, put the thoughts out of his head, and shout loudly for the soldiers to prepare to set off. Watching the warship slowly leave the port, on the port watchtower, Kuzan leaned against the wall and let out a cold breath. I have already told you what I should tell you. Then, what will you do next? What, Loya? The days of sailing at sea are always the same, monotonous and repetitive. In this state, the time is easily passed. It seems that it is just a blink of an eye, and it is time for dinner again one day. However, compared to drifting at sea in the past, they were fortunate enough to discover a small island today, where they could dock the warship on the leeward of the island and cook with peace of mind. Although they are all naval soldiers, it is undoubtedly a happy thing to be able to not eat on the swaying warship. Loya turned over and jumped off the back of Pippi Shrimp, stepped on the soft golden sand under his feet, and stretched out in comfort. Ah, this is a really suitable place for camping. Putting down his hand, Loya listened attentively, and suddenly his eyes lit up. I heard the beast. Come with me, you guys, we won't eat fish tonight. One Piece's world is vast, and most of the food sources are all kinds of marine creatures, even the Navy is no exception. After eating seafood a few times, it still feels delicious, but if you eat too much, you will feel tired. When you hear that there is game tonight, you can enjoy it. The soldiers immediately widened their eyes and ran to Loya excitedly, awaiting orders. With Loya present, although there are some frozen dried meat and vegetables on the warship, Huo Shaoshan and Dalmizha will naturally not refuse to be able to eat some fresh game. Immediately, Huo Shaoshan shouted to Loya from a distance, Loya, catch more and come back. No problem, I'll take back everything that can breathe. After speaking, Loya asked the soldiers to carry the rope and net Kabuto, and walked into the forest. Regionally, the Great Root is at the equator of this world. Therefore, as long as it is not an island with special weather, the vegetation of ordinary small islands is extremely lush. Entering the forest, before taking a closer look, Loya raised his hand and lifted a bunch of unknown giant pythons out of the swamp, frozen into a ball, and threw them behind him. It seems that there are more animals here than we imagined. Within the range of Loya's perception, Countless brilliance representing the vitality of living creatures is like the stars in the sky, densely connected and dazzling. After thinking for a while, Loya simply stopped and said to the soldiers behind him, "Don't be too busy moving. You guys, go back and inform General Yamanaka, saying that there are too many prey, let him find more, get someone. I'll go hunting first, and you just follow the trail I leave." After speaking, regardless of the confusion of the people behind him, Loya stretched out his wings and flew directly into the sky. If there are traces, how should we find them? Watching Loya fly away directly, all the soldiers, look at me, I look at you, and suddenly feel extremely tired. But at this moment, a strong explosion resounded through the forest. From the perspective of the movement, it was far away from them, but the cold wind that blew made this feeling very clear. The trees in front of them immediately formed a layer of ice crust, which was extremely white and dazzling. Seeing this scene, several soldiers secretly swallowed their saliva, looked at each other helplessly and went back to find Yamanaka to report. Well, this trace is really easy to understand. Separated from the soldiers, Loya flew in the air, constantly looking for ingredients for the night. With a wave of the ice halberd in his hand, the ice spears appeared out of thin air and rushed towards the terrified prey. This move looks very handsome, but in fact it is just creating an ice spear while waving the ice halberd. But Loya was having a great time, jumping left and right with great interest. Wild boars, pheasants, crocodiles, deer, cattle, sheep. Anyway, as long as the things that appear within his perception range, without exception, are frozen in place by him, the dead can no longer die. There are 5 warships going out to sea this time, including the accompanying sailing frigates. There are a total of 500 or 600 people. These prey seem to be quite a lot, but if you can't finish a meal, there will be another meal. Eat a few more meals, and there will always be a day to eat. When Huo Shaoshan led the soldiers into the forest, what they saw was such a scene. In the lush green forest, a bright and icy road appeared in front of everyone so grandly. Countless beasts and birds that were frozen to death were placed on the left and right sides of the ice road, combined with the silent environment because of the dragon's might, making this ice road resemble the legendary ice hell. When the soldiers were shocked, Huo Shaoshan silently came to a group of wild boars in a running posture, and tapped the thick fur with his hands. Then, he pursed his lips and sighed, "This guy, can't he be so messy?" Behind him, Lieutenant General Dalmisia twitched his nose suspiciously, and sniffed the wild boar carefully. "Is there a problem? Burning the mountain? Isn't this just an ordinary wild boar?" "Just because this is an ordinary wild boar." Huo Shaoshan shook his head regretfully. "The wild boar doesn't bleed, it smells like hell. You see it's frozen like this, how can you eat this meat?" Dalmisia. Surrounding Marines. This grown-up has a good point. Dalmisia looked at the herd of deer and sheep that were also frozen around, her eyes narrowed, and she fully mobilized the ability of her dog Fruit. "I found it. He's over there. Go." Involuntarily, Huo Shaoshan immediately started to shave and headed in the direction pointed out by Dalmisia. If they move slowly, the beasts on this island will be killed. It's okay to kill them all, they're not environmentalists anyway. But they can't eat them all. This is very embarrassing. For their appetite, the two decided to stop Loya's crazy behavior. Watching the 2 big men turn into a small black spot and disappear into the depths of the forest in a blink of an eye, the soldiers who fell on the spot sighed helplessly, and silently picked their prey and moved back. Although most of the prey are unpalatable because they are not bloodletted, there is always a little that can be eaten. Mosquitoes are meat no matter how small they may be, so it is enough to not eat those seafish and jerky that are about to vomit. There are still wild yams growing here, bring a bag over here. On the way to transport the prey, some soldiers found some edible plants, and immediately picked them back happily, enjoying the rare leisure in laughter. Just as Huo Shaoshan and Dalmisia were tracking Loya, who was in a hunting state, suddenly stopped and looked into the depths of the island. What does it feel like? So familiar. Chapter 312 Temple and Knife. Chapter error. Click here to report. It was a feeling that Loya couldn't describe. He had never felt it before, but it had a feeling of déjà vu. This experience is very contradictory. His reason tells him that he has never touched that thing, but his sixth sense is saying that there is a deep connection between them. Loya didn't know what it was, but that didn't stop him from going to find out. So Loya stopped hunting, turned around, and flew in that direction. At the same time, in the forest on the ground, Lieutenant General Dalmisia shrugged his nose, turned his head to Huo Shaoshan and said, "No, he has changed direction again. He moves so fast that we can't catch up with it. Hey, it's really troublesome." Huo Shaoshan sighed helplessly and said to Dalmisia, "Well, you continue to chase him, I'll find a higher position, I hope he can see I stop." After the discussion between the two was completed, the troops split into two groups and continued to chase the trail of Loya. With the convenient means of flying, Loya quickly crossed the dense jungle and found the source of the familiar feeling. It was an abandoned temple hidden in the forest. Thick green vines climbed up the broken wall standing on the ground, like a rope, so that the cracked Jinchuriki column would not collapse. The iron brazier slanted and fell to the ground, and the smudges left by the burning inside had long been mixed with the rain and soil all the year round, turning it into an unsightly lump of mud. Slowly falling on the broken stone steps in front of the temple, Loya glanced around, pinching his chin thoughtfully. This place is weird. In the airy temple on all sides, the pattern on the ceiling is particularly striking. As a science and engineering man who traveled from the Earth, although the latter point is not important, Loya still knows what it is. Although the overall structure is very peculiar, it reminds Loya of those cartoon characters he has seen in his previous life, but from the appearance, this pattern undoubtedly draws a giant dragon. And the person who built this temple also carefully used a kind of light blue and black spar fragments to stick to the dragon's body little by little. Just standing in the temple can make people feel a terrifying momentum from the wild. Especially the pair of giant dragon's eyes. That pair of unknown gems are simply ingenious. Just one glance reminded Loya of the pair of eyes he once saw in a dream. Those are the eyes of a real dragon. It can be seen that the guy who built this temple definitely did not create this dragon picture out of thin air. He, or they, had really seen a living dragon. Does One Piece have a creature like the giant dragon in Western legends on Earth? This is a question worth exploring. So far, no trace of the Western dragon has been exposed in the original work. On the contrary, did the dragon of Washa Totem really appear, or it was on Momonosuke who had to die? Walking quietly in this huge temple, Loya carefully looked for the smell that made him familiar. The source of that feeling is right here, but when I came here, the same familiar feeling came from all directions. This is the same as the dog can't find the owner in the room full of the owner's smell. Loya is also a little numb at the moment. It would be nice if there were any other characteristics of what he was looking for, but as it stands, he doesn't even know what he's looking for. What is it? When he came to the platform on the side of the temple, Loya squatted on the highest stone Jinchuriki column, frowning in thought. Suddenly, he narrowed his eyes and felt something shaking his eyes. Looking in the direction of the light source, Loya tilted his head and smacked his lips. Yo. It looks like there was a battle here. What made Loya dazzled was a weapon with most of it buried in the soil and a diamond inlaid on the hilt. I don't know how many years this thing has been buried in the soil. The handle of the knife wrapped in animal skin has become tattered with the passage of time. Even the diamond that was released is enough to make countless girls and ladies dance excitedly. The dirt hides the brilliance. And the only thing that still shone with light was the exposed blade that was no bigger than half a fingernail. Almost all of it is buried in the soil, but even that little light can emit an eye-catching light. In the mentality of not being able to lose money even if he didn't find it, Loya teleported to the side of the weapon and kicked it with his toes. But it was such an ordinary action that Loya almost lost his toes. It's not that his angle is wrong, or that the knife has special spikes on it. There is only one real reason, and that is that it is so dazzling. At the moment when he was kicked out of the soil and exposed to the air, a dazzling light that Roja had never felt shot out from the knife. Loya once watched an experimental video, that is, a certain killer made a flash bomb to test his limit. At that time, even across the screen, Loya's eyes were flashed with halos, and everything looked at Madara with a green light. At that time, he was still thinking about how the little brother who was in close contact with the flash bomb felt. Now, he suddenly understood. This is true, blinding my 24K titanium alloy dog eyes. It was in such a dazzling light that Loya was caught off guard and lost his vision in an instant. If it weren't for the danger perception of observation hockey and the body of the dragon, I'm afraid this knife would really have to fall on his feet to know. What the hell is this meow, and flash bombs aren't so scary. Loya rubbed her tearful eyes while complaining, and was embarrassed by the trouble. After a while, Loya regained his sight under the recovery feature of the dragon's body. The knife was lying quietly on the ground at the moment, except that the blade was clean, there was no such special flashing. Eating a cut grows wisdom, Loya put his hand in front of his eyes, and carefully used his foot to scratch the long knife on the ground. Fortunately, this time it didn't continue to burst out that kind of blinding light, it just shook a little and didn't respond. After several times in a row, Roja finally made sure that this thing would not flash again, so he put down his hand and carefully looked at this strange long knife. It was a long sword with a length of about 5 feet, and the overall style was biased towards the big sword of the island country. But compared to those dachi, the blade curvature of this knife is too small. If it weren't for Roja's amazing eyesight, he would almost have regarded the knife as a straight line. But in fact, starting from the middle of the blade, the knife does have a slight arc. But that doesn't change the fact that it looks odd. In Loya's opinion, the way this thing hurts the enemy should not be used to cut, but to stab. In addition to the blade part, there is still a strangeness at the handle. Knives and weapons. Weapons, tools of murder. No matter how history names them official history, it cannot be denied that this knife is a murder weapon. Just a glance at the sharp blade reminds people of the tearing sound of skeletal muscles being cut. However, it is such a peerless murderer, and its hilt is inlaid with a valuable diamond. As we all know, what kind of weapons will be inlaid with precious gems? Only weapons used for honor guards or weapons with greater symbolic significance than actual combat significance have such treatment. And this knife is definitely not the same kind of flashy, the smell of blood coming from the pit, so that Loya can say with certainty that this knife has seen countless blood. So the question is, what is this thing used for? G_Cup actress idol debut A_ won the championship. Watch online. Please pay attention to the WeChat public account, mainblue 123, long press for 3 seconds to copy. Add bookmarks for easy reading. Chapter 313 Violent Demolition. Please subscribe. Chapter Error. Click here to report. It is obviously a sharp weapon that sees countless blood, but at the same time, it is decorated with precious and gorgeous decorations, and it is arrogant. If these opposing conditions can appear at the same time, then there is only one possibility. Click. Loya pushed the glasses frame made of ice on the bridge of his nose, sneered, and raised his index finger at the long knife over there. There is only one truth. Prisoner. Ah, that's what you're actually, a ceremonial knife. Since ancient times, things like blood matsuri have existed in the long history, and ritual knives were born. Today, even when the new warships of the Navy headquarters are launched, they must use a knife to plan a set of livestock to pray for safety. Of course, as to whether they believe this or not, then the benevolent sees the benevolent and the wise sees the wisdom. Judging from the scale of this temple, it was undoubtedly a temple with a large number of sects in the past. The large number of people means that there are many people with firm beliefs. As the saying goes, there are more monsters in the mountains, and more people. Cough. And, looking at the hole left after pulling out the long knife, Loya flicked his finger and let a diamond-shaped ice cube wrapped around a silky ice line disappear. Ice bomb spider. Boom. Soon, there was a muffled sound under the ground, and countless slender ice strands bounced out instantly, feeding back everything in the soil to Loya. Feeling the touch from the ice line, a sneer appeared on the corner of Loya's mouth. It really is a bloody sect. In Loya's perception, the situation under the ground is unobstructed. There was a square pit the size of the temple on the ground. It stands to reason that when there is such a huge building on the surface, there is such a big pit underground, and the building should have collapsed long ago. However, if this big hole is filled with stuff, that's another story. This is the truth, the underground here is filled with things. The bottom of the temple the size of 3 basketball courts is filled with human corpses. Mukuro. Tisk tisk, ignorant mortal. Through this scene, Loya can already make up a 300,000-word story of a human being ruled by an evil dragon and struggling to survive under oppression. In this way, the reason why there are no statues in the temple, but the carving of the dragon image on the ceiling, not only represents the difference between the 2 living areas, but also represents the status between the 2. Dragon, stand in the sky. People, crawling on the ground. But this is all Loya's guess. What the truth is, it is still up to the archaeologists to know. Akatsuki. I believe that there is a living dragon of his own. As long as Sengoku knows about this temple, he will not miss the opportunity to obtain information. This is not to explore the blank 100-year history, but to pursue the legendary creature like the giant dragon. I believe that even the world government will have great interest. But, where did that familiarity come from? Leaving aside the hidden story behind the temple, Loya has returned to his normality. The knife was pulled out, but that feeling didn't come from it. Now the whole temple is still full of that vague sense of familiarity, haunting Loya's heart. A few more minutes passed, and the search was fruitless again, and Loya's eyes turned cold. HMPH, I wasn't going to use this trick. No matter what you are, I'll put the ugly words in front of you, this is all you forced me. After speaking, Loya suddenly turned into a black line and quickly came to the top floor of the temple. Crack clap. Squeezing the joints, Loya shook his head, loosened his muscles and bones, and then bang! With a loud bang, a large stone weighing several tons that had taken many lives to transport here was directly kicked away by Loya. The stones with tattoos and very archaeological value are like the rubbish that can be seen everywhere at the moment, swirling and submerging into the jungle. After a long time, there was a muffled sound in the forest. Fortunately, the surrounding animals ran away as early as Loya's arrival because of Longway's unbridled spread on him. Otherwise it would definitely be another big riot. Loya's thinking is very simple. Since there is that familiar feeling everywhere, he can't tell the source. Then, the temple will be demolished, stone by stone. It's impossible for the entire temple to be the body, right? As long as any part can still give him that familiar feeling after being removed, then that is what he is looking for. It has to be said that sometimes violence can really solve the problem. After kicking the stone, Loya quickly flew into the jungle and found the stone. Carefully feel the residual breath on it, the familiar feeling quickly dissipated, and it soon turned into an ordinary stone. In this regard, Loya nodded with satisfaction. Very good. Sure enough, the temple is not the body. Next, just look for them one by one. After speaking, Loya turned back immediately and continued her demolition work. Just as Loya was carrying out the violent demolition, at the same time, in the forest. Boom! The sudden dull sound frightened Lieutenant General Dalmesia, whose hearing greatly increased, and in the half-beast form, he immediately jumped back and turned over, watching the surroundings vigilantly. What's going on here? There's an earthquake. After staying in place for a while, and seeing that nothing happened, Lieutenant General Dalmesia cautiously moved on. And then, boom! Whoa! In addition to their strong physical strength and amazing resilience, those with animal fruit abilities have a more significant feature that their senses of danger are very keen. Almost at the moment when the stone fell from the sky, Dalmesia obeyed his own instinct without thinking, and jumped forward. Although it came down very suddenly, making him in the half-beast form literally fall into the mud, but this indecent action undoubtedly saved his life and let him escape the fate of being crushed by a big stone. Almost at the same time as he left the place, a huge stone about a person's height fell from the sky and fell straight there. Affected by the huge impact, the thick soil layer squirmed lightly, and Dalmisia only felt like she was stepping on a piece of cotton. At the place where the stone fell, countless dead branches and rotten leaves mixed with soil were thrown high by the impact, and after reaching the peak, they fell scattered. Just a little bit, and he's dead. Lieutenant General Dalmisia, who narrowly escaped, gasped for a few breaths, but before he could take a closer look, he heard a familiar voice appear behind him. Remaining in the form of a dragon, Loya clasped the equally hard scales behind his head with hard claws, and said embarrassingly, "Well, if I said I didn't mean it, would you believe it?" "I believe in you, asshole." Dalmisia turned her head and roared at Loya's tip Kiba, cooperating with his dog's skin, like Erha who had never lost a fight. "I almost died. What are you doing? Demolition. You are not a husky." "No, the husky is not as destructive as you are." Being roared by Dalmisia, Loa looked at him blankly, a little unable to return to his senses. It turned out that Lieutenant General Dalmisia, who was so trusted by Sengoku, was still a slobber. Thailand's most breasted female anchor brand new passion_video exposure throwing down the male protagonist is so hungry_thirsty. Please pay attention to the WeChat public account to watch online. Mine Vikshuan 1, long press for 3 seconds to copy. Add bookmarks for easy reading. Chapter 314 The Muscular Stone and the Blind Lieutenant General Dalmisia. After roaring and venting his inner fears, Lieutenant General Dalmisia felt much better, sat on the collapsed tree trunk, and asked Loya, then, "What are you doing? Where did these stones come from? And how did they look like some architectural stuff?" Although Dalmisia didn't continue to trouble Loya, he was relieved, but he was actually quite embarrassed now. The ghost knows why. Obviously the stone looks the same as the previous ones, and the angle and size of its force are the same, but this stone will bounce. It goes that far in one shot. It almost hit Lieutenant General Dalmisia's head. Hearing the other party's question, Loya explained with a shy smile, "Well, just now I found an abandoned temple in the open space over there. I wanted to find out if there was anything good, so I took it apart. Come and see." That familiar feeling, even Loya didn't understand what was going on, and Dalmisia couldn't understand it. In this case, Loya simply omits the rest of the explanation and directly says that he has taken a fancy to the treasure inside. This kind of thing is very normal in the world of One Piece. Treasure hunting is not the patent of pirates. The Navy sometimes searches for treasures on some unregistered islands. After all, the traffic in this world is too underdeveloped, and there are countless unknown islands, so Loya's explanation is not very strange. Just, did you demolish other people's temples because you were looking for treasure? Dalmisia looked at Loya blankly, a little stunned, and muttered to herself, "This is it, really looks like your style." But since there was nothing wrong, he was not going to investigate the reason, patted the dirt on his butt, stood up, and said to Loya, "Then, did you find anything good?" "That's natural." Loya smiled proudly, reached out and took out an exaggerated long knife from behind. At this time, Dalmisia saw that there was such a thing tied behind Loya's back, which was covered by the dragon wings. He was also interested and stretched out his hand to pick it up. It turned out to be a weapon. "Loya, your luck is really good." Ah, my eyes." The moment he just raised his hand, when the whole long knife came into view, Dalmisia only felt a dazzling white light suddenly shoot out, blinding his dog's eyes. In just a split second, he fell to the ground holding Tong Yuhi's eyes, tears and snot flowing non-stop. But Luoya raised the long knife strangely and looked at the motionless long knife with a confused expression. "Hey, what's the situation? I didn't see anything." "Ah, don't you see? That knife is glowing. It's dazzling." Lieutenant General Dalmisia rolled on the ground in pain, and he didn't look like he was acting at all. And through his powerful hearing, Loya clearly knows how the other party is feeling now. Because he was the tough Lieutenant General of the Navy headquarters, his heartbeat started beating rapidly at this moment. This is definitely what happens when you endure unbearable pain. Immediately, Loya inserted the long knife into the soil and asked Lieutenant General Dalmisia, "I inserted it into the ground, now what?" "I don't know. I can't see anything." Flashbangs can cause temporary blindness and deafness, tinnitus, and even inner ear damage. Untrained people may also be stunned, so they are also called blinding bombs and stun bombs. Loya had never seen a real flashbang explode, but the light from this odd long knife seemed to be as powerful as a flashbang on Earth. Most of the powerhouses in the world of One Piece are ordinary human beings. Perhaps their physical strength will exceed the imagination of ordinary people when attacking and after they are covered with armament hockey, but the specific structure and weaknesses are actually not as strong as ordinary people. The difference. So, facing the sudden white light, Lieutenant General Dalmisia, who was caught off guard, was blinded and fell into a state of temporary blindness. Maybe a little tinnitus and deafness. Because his voice in answering Loya's question is extremely loud. "Is this a ghost? Why am I okay?" Loya looked at the long knife completely submerged in the soil in a strange way, puzzled. However, this is also a great opportunity. Luoya's eyes narrowed, and he came directly to the bouncing stone. The dragon claws in his right hand were close together into a drill, and he slammed into it. Puff! With the sound of the sharp blade sinking, Loya's entire arm sank into the stone. Looking up at the sky and feeling the movement on his hand, Loya carefully digged inside and touched a hard object. Found it. This is it. With a slight smile, Loya grabbed the thing and retracted his hand, then tucked it into his kabuto pants. Just as the stone flew out, the familiar feeling that lingered on the temple just now disappeared, like a closed faucet. At the same time, the source of that feeling was moving fast, and the target was pointing directly at this big rock. Loya didn't know what was so special about this stone, but his goal was here, so he hurried to catch up. But who would have thought that after the stone hit a tree trunk, it would bounce back? It still shoots so far. Fortunately, Lieutenant Admiral Dalmisia has a deep relationship, otherwise he would be the first Lieutenant General of the headquarters to be accidentally wounded and killed by a friendly army in the history of the Navy. Putting that shiny thing into kabuto, the stone in front of him quickly turned into an ordinary stone just like its predecessors. However, looking at the hole inserted by himself and the patterns on the surrounding stone walls, Loya narrowed his eyes slightly. This is muscle tissue. Even if the color is the same as a normal stone, the texture that is unique to the muscles will not be mistaken by anyone who has seen blood. With Loya's movements, the stone suspected to be muscle quickly shattered and turned gray, and a trace of ashes floated down from above. Then, in just a few seconds, the entire big rock turned into a plume of white ash and scattered all over the place. Looking at this scene, Loya only felt that something bad was about to happen. Just a piece of muscle tissue is so huge, so what size should its owner's body be? And the last time I saw this behemoth was Titan Hook on Ian Island. Well, of course, the sea kings he has eaten during this time must be excluded. That was not a good memory for Loya. At this moment, Lieutenant General Dalmisia, who was lying on the ground and gasping for breath, spoke weakly and called to Loya, "Loya, do you think I'm blind?" "Blind fart." Loya replied angrily. "Anyway, you are also a Lieutenant General of the Navy headquarters, or an animal fruit person, and your physical strength is not much better than that of a beast. Just a flash of light can blind you, so squeamish, then our Navy what else do you use to deal with pirates?" After a pause, Loya continued, "The first time I saw this knife, I was flashed once, and now it's not good. You wait a moment, I'll get you some ice and apply it." Chapter 315 Hawkeye Mahawk. Those with the animal fruit ability are in good health. In just a few minutes, Lieutenant General Dalmisia can barely open his eyes to see things. It's just that he is still swollen around his eyes, and he can't see anything clearly. Sitting on a tree trunk, he coldly compresses his eyes with ice cubes made by Loya, while looking at the long knife with lingering fears. The ghost knows why. After blinding him once, the long knife returned to its original appearance, and no longer had that dazzling brilliance. It was just that unique shape that surprised Lieutenant General Dalmisia. He is also a well-informed veteran, but he has never heard of any weapon with such an exaggerated length. Even compared with Hawkeye Mahawk's black blade, yay, which is known as the strongest in the world, its length is exaggerated and frightening. The average swordsman holds it, let alone slashing people. It is a good thing to be stumbled by the weapon without making a joke. Originally, finding a usable weapon during a treasure hunt was a very happy thing for the strong people like them. After being disinterested in the trivialities of ordinary chai, rice, oil and salt, dreams and becoming stronger are the eternal topics of these people. For enhancing strength, a good weapon is undoubtedly crucial. But I don't know what picture came to mind. Lieutenant General Dalmisia said in a sigh, if you take out this knife, it is probably not used to cut people. Yes, I know, this thing should be easier to stab than to chop. Loya replied without looking up. No, I mean, Dalmisia glanced at the long knife with Yuhi's swollen eyes, and sighed, I believe that as soon as you take it out, it will be able to kill the enemy's blind eyes. It's also used to cut a fart. You can just rush up and chop people into minced meat, okay. He knew the pain of losing his vision suddenly and his eyes were still sore. Because of his confidence in his own strength, Lieutenant General Dalmisia didn't think that many people could maintain their combat effectiveness in this kind of torture. Loya. He is right. However, it is necessary to ensure that this thing can only blind the opponent's eyes every time it is taken out. If even the knife holder can't avoid it, then let's all go blind together. Just the two of them can't come to a conclusion after testing, and more people have to test it. Thinking of this, Loya asked curiously, speaking of which, are you only Lieutenant General Dalmisia who came alone? What about setting fire to General Yamanaka? He's here too. Dalmisia rubbed his eyes and said, because you're flying too fast, so I'll track your scent. He's looking for a vantage point, hoping you can see him. Yes, almost forget about business. He clapped his palms, pointed at Loya and said, also, can you not freeze all the prey? Do you know that the meat of wild boars can't be swallowed if they don't bleed? Ah, that's how it is. Luoya is also a hammer hand, and suddenly realized, no wonder the wild boar I caught on the isolated island before joining the navy tasted so bad. It turned out to be because I didn't bleed. If it wasn't for this, I would have long ago eat them all up. In all fairness, when choosing prey between wild boars and rabbits, many people will choose wild boars. Just because Loya didn't know how to deal with it and thought that wild boars were too unpalatable, only those wild boars were left on the desert island at that time. Since even his client didn't know the reason, what else could Dalmisia say? She could only helplessly rub her eyes and sit back on the tree trunk. Just as Loya was waiting for Lieutenant General Dalmisia to recover, at this moment, the fire of General Yamanaka encountered a little trouble. Gently sipping a cigar to avoid the smoke blocking his sight, Huo Shaoshan looked solemnly at the man sitting on the barbecue not far ahead. The kind smile of the past completely disappeared. King Sha Chiwahai, Hawkeye Mahawk. Why are you here? That's right, the one who appeared in front of Huoshao Mountain was the one known as the strongest swordsman in the world, Jorakor Mahawk. In the face of Huo Shaoshan's inquiry, Mahawk calmly glanced at Huo Shaoshan with his eagle-like eyes, then ignored him, turned his head and pulled his coat lined with wine yuhi color to avoid being caught in the bonfire exploding sparks burn. The other party did not speak, and Huo Shaoshan had nothing to do. He is a swordsman himself, so he is well aware of Mahawk's power. Zoro was able to swing a knife at Mahawk in the East China Sea. In addition to being the strongest belief in the world to support him, more importantly, he didn't even know about observation hockey at that time. If he knew observation hockey, then what he saw at that time should be the same as what Huo Shanshan sees now. Hawkeye sat there, and what appeared in Huo Shaoshan's eyes was not a simple figure, but a slowly rotating sharp blade. This isn't some demonic illusion, nor is it a hallucination of the burning mountain. It's just that he exudes that powerful sword intent, which naturally brings a sense of oppression to the rest of the swordsmen. More importantly, the sharp blade that resembled the Black Sword Knight was also shrouded in a hazy white light similar to a scabbard. Once this layer of light disappears and the sharp blade is unsheathed, the power will be earth-shattering. After the two were deadlocked for a while, Mahak slowly withdrew the sword intent that had spread out. His original intention was to use this momentum to frighten the beasts in the forest and avoid being disturbed. But since Huo Shaoshan appeared here, the source of the breath he felt before is self-evident. Only that guy can burst out with that kind of ignoring and domineering aura. That's not Shenk's self-confidence, but something that stands at the top, of course. I believe that with this momentum remaining here, the animals on this island are all hiding and taking refuge. It can save a little effort. This is what everyone wants to see. While waiting for the food on the stick to be cooked, Mahak took out a small silver jug and took a sip silently. Then, he finally looked at Huo Shaoshan, and said lightly, I have been here for 3 days, so if I really want to talk about it, it should be me asking you what you are doing here. Navy. Quote. Hawkeye has a calm personality and has always gone his own way, and Huo Shaoshan couldn't figure out the other party's intentions for a while. However, since the other party has no intention of fighting, it is naturally the best. Immediately, he retracted his sword and put a smile on his serious face again. Ah, is that so? I'm really sorry to bother you. After a pause, Huo Shaoshan exhaled a breath of smoke and continued, we just stopped for a while because we passed through this place. But you, a big man, did not stay here to hone your sword skills on the island of Kregana, but came here instead. The barbecue on this deserted island really amazes me. Quote. What? Another swordsman is here to challenge you. As long as Mahak believes that the other party has the qualifications, then once a swordsman challenges him, he will answer the other party with the black knife in his hand. The speculation of Huo Shaoshan might not be a problem in normal times, but Mahak at this time obviously did not come here because he accepted the challenge. Silently looking at the barbecue in front of him, Mahak was silent for a few seconds, then suddenly said, me. I'll pass the time. Chapter 316 Dragon Scales. Is it better? If you're all right, I'll go on the treasure hunt. Although the things have already been obtained, the show still needs to be done in full. As a result, Loya made an eager look for treasure and said to Lieutenant General Dalmisia. Hearing his words, Lieutenant General Dalmisia waved helplessly and said that he was fine. Forget it, you can go. I'll go to Huo Shaoshan later and get some prey to bring back. It's all right. If I don't find anything after dismantling it, I will take it back with you. You should rest first. After speaking, Loya turned around and fluttered his wings and flew towards the temple. When he returned to the ruins of the disfigured temple that had been demolished, and determined that Lieutenant General Dalmisia had not followed, Loya carefully took out the thing he found earlier from Kabuto and put it in his palm. But when he saw the whole picture of the thing, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. This is dragon scale. What appeared in front of him was a dragon scale the size of half a palm. He is a dragon slayer himself, which allows Loya to distinguish the origin of this thing even if he has never seen it with his own eyes. It should be a fragment that fell from a large dragon scale, lying in the palm of Loya's palm, showing an irregular polygon. Moreover, this piece of dragon scale seems to be transparent. Under the sunlight, it is like a crystal-clear diamond, emitting a dazzling white light from the inside out. Rotate it at an angle, and the brilliance on it becomes different. Sometimes Yuhi is bright and sometimes green, and the colors are really beautiful. There really is a dragon in this world. This is really. Loya took a deep breath and suppressed the vibration in his heart. Then, he stretched out his sharp fingernails and slashed vertically on the dragon scale. Squeak. With the sharp sound that made Kiba sour, Loya was surprised to find that his dragon claws, which he had never met before, had been rubbed off a corner. On the other hand, the dragon scale, let alone scratches, didn't even show a white mark. This level of hardness is far inferior to even Halu stone. If dragons really exist in this world, where are they now? Why isn't there any news about dragons in this world? Looking at the piece of dragon scale fragment, Loya couldn't help but fell into contemplation. His own transmigration, the existence of Edith, the Dragon Slayer wizard system, and the huge eyes in the dream world, plus the dragon scales that really appeared in his hands now, Loya suddenly felt that something was wrong. It seems to get complicated. I thought it was a pleasant journey through X-loading, but with the assistance of the system, he was able to get along well, and the Crystal Palace opened wide. But in the arena, he can't help himself. Even in a strange world, he has some more ties that he can't let go of, and he is not so free. I thought that was enough, but now it seems that things are not so simple. However, it is still within the range of its own predictions. From a long time ago, when he first doubted his own power, Loya had already prepared for the worst. The worst case is that, like in fantasy, he is a chess piece, controlled by an unknown existence, and lives for the benefit of an unknown existence. However, from the current situation, things have not developed to that point. I still want to eat and sleep, without any restrictions. Loya didn't know what was going on, but it didn't stop him from enjoying his life. Everything has to be true. How tiring should be to live, isn't it? Recovering his thoughts, Loya raised his head and looked at the picture of the giant dragon, which had been changed beyond recognition due to the demolition, with an indifferent smile on the corner of his mouth. If there's any secret, then it's up to me to find out. On the other side, where the Burning Mountain and Mahak are located. Hearing Mahak's explanation, Huo Shaoshan was slightly stunned. He pursed his cheeks lightly, looked around the uninhabited forest again, and asked in a low voice, to pass time in this place. As we all know, Hawkeye is a peak powerhouse who can ride on the sea alone with a coffin boat. It is common to receive news from the branch below, either Hawkeye and Idle Panic cut which pirate group, or he floated on the sea and slept, or else he sent those swordsmen who came to challenge. But I never heard that Hawkeye would like to spend time on this deserted island. He is withdrawn, but he is also a normal person. Who would come to a deserted island with nothing but a hunter like Jones? Still killing time. I'm afraid it's Shi-Lezi. Therefore, for Hawkeye's explanation, Huo Shaoshan's first reaction was not to believe it. The second reaction, that's all I can think of. Regardless of the opponent's strength, Mahak is still the current king of the Chihuahai, a big man under the direct jurisdiction of the world government. If you really want to count, Chihuahai and the Navy are also on an equal footing. As a lieutenant general of the headquarters, can he still question whether the other party is successful? So Huo Shaoshan no longer bothered about this issue, and said to Mahak, well, since you want to stay here, then I won't bother. After a pause, Huo Shaoshan asked, speaking of which, do you know the latest news about Moria? Why did he leave the Devil's Triangle? Although I don't think Moria can have any friendship with Mahak, the other party is also one of the Seven Seas after all. Out of professional habit, Huo Shaoshan had to ask this question. Of course. After listening to Huo Shaoshan's question, Mahak asked him strangely, why should I know about Moria? A coward who has lost his courage is not worth my attention to him. Mahak would have no problem answering that. Think about it too, according to the original book, he was able to save Zoro's life when he challenged him. Was it really because he was a good guy? Of course not. It was only because the integrity and courage that Sauron showed at the time moved him, and that made him show mercy. Swordsmen are a group of people who put their faith above everything else. This is even more true for Mahak. At his level, the power of the heart is stronger than the sword in his hand. That's why he looked down on Moria, who lost his courage because he failed to challenge Guy so much. He also thought of this burning mountain, so he smiled and took off the cigar from the corner of his mouth. I see, it seems that I didn't think about it carefully. Then I'll take my leave first, and I'll have someone bring you some good wine later as an apology for disturbing you. After all, Huo Shaoshan turned around and left, disappearing into the forest. During the process, Mahak remained silent. After waiting for him to walk away, he slowly raised his head and looked at the place where the aura disappeared. A gleam of light flashed in his eagle-like eyes. The falling of the stars, has it begun? That direction is exactly where the temple is located. And the thing he felt was in that direction. Not knowing what to think, Mahak took a sip from the jug, and a rare smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. It's no wonder that the old guy didn't allow me to look for it before he died. It turned out that it really didn't belong to me. After all, the form is only a foreign object. I have a heart and you, and that's enough. Gently stroking the black knife placed on his knee, Mahak suddenly gripped the handle of the knife, and suddenly swung his hand to cut it out. Laugh. A dazzling sword light flashed by, and the next moment, the trees within a few hundred meters in front of him fell to the ground, and the incision was extremely smooth. 7110. Chapter 317 Loya's Security Measures. By the time Loya and Dalmisia returned to the beach, the sun had completely set. The clear night sky is studded with diamond-like sparkling stars, and the bright moonlight is reflected on the tranquil sea, making it difficult to tell which is the sky and where is the earth. Occasionally a breeze blows, ripples on the sea surface, and the shattered moonlight is like a broken white jade bowl, and the person watching it feels regretful. It was in such a beautiful night that a very unsocial noise broke the silence of the night. It's a banquet. Oh. Today's staple food is the Sea Kings captured by Lieutenant Generals Loya and Dalmisia. The ghost knows why. There is an inland lake on this island. Moreover, there is also a Sea King living in the lake that cannot escape. Probably when he was very young, he swam in along the channel connecting the bottom of the lake to the sea. Now it has grown into a behemoth 10 meters high, and it will never go back. Originally, if it stayed at the bottom of the lake honestly, Loya would not be interested in listing it as a recipe, but it shouldn't be, it turned out to be interested in the prey of the two. This is very embarrassing. Since you want to eat Lao Su's, I'm sorry, I'm going to eat you. Especially since the other party is still an octopus-like Sea King, Loya can use it with a sense of peace of mind, and he doesn't have to worry about it being difficult to swallow because the blood cannot be released from freezing. The chefs on several warships all gathered around and cut the huge octopus into countless small pieces. Then use it for soups, barbecues, and steaming. Chopped and kneaded into takoyaki, sliced to make teppanyaki, and then the whole tentacles were placed on a rack and burned with fire. Anyway, I tried my best to cook it into delicious dishes. In this regard, the Navy soldiers are very moved, usually chewing the food and crying, "Why do you still eat seafood?" Agreed to eat game tonight. Look at a bunch of guys wrestling over there, fighting over ownership of a roast leg of lamb. HMPH, rotten wood can't be carved. Loya commented, then handed the grilled octopus meat to Pippi Shrimp, and picked up the fresh stewed meat to eat. For this chaotic scene, Lieutenant General Dalmisia held up his chopsticks angrily and knocked on the plate. What kind of style? What kind of style? Even the soldiers on the night watch are not arranged. In case of being attacked by pirates, how much loss will we have to bear? Can you both take responsibility for this? Okay, you can't keep your mouth shut even if you eat meat. Loya rolled his eyes at him. It's only in this wild country, it's a strange thing to meet pirates. Do you know what a secret route is? Besides, isn't that not allowing them to drink? As long as they don't get drunk, there's nothing wrong with being happy. The Navy has maintained the security of the sea for so many years, and has already figured out several waterways that can be navigated without recording pointers. These waterways are generally not located in the gaps between the islands and will not be disturbed by the recording pointer, so it is difficult to meet pirates. The last time I met a pirate on a secret route had to be pushed back to the O'Hara incident 17 years ago. Of course, in the face of the Navy that launched the slaughtering order, the fate of that pirate group can be imagined. 5 lieutenant generals plus 10 major generals plus nearly 10,000 naval elites plus 10 top warships. This configuration is enough to destroy the country, not to mention a small pirate group. Seeing the two bickering, the good old man Huo Shaoshan raised his hand to appease. Well, It's rare to be able to relax when the task is out. Come, the meat is roasted, come and taste. After that, he picked up the knife, cut the roasted mutton with dripping oil, and placed it on the plates of the two of them. Seeing that Huo Shaoshan, who has always been steady, didn't support him, Dalmesia's hair on his mouth was about to rise, and he was trembling as if he had suffered a cerebral thrombosis. So, Loya stood up and walked out. Huo Shaoshan was stunned for a moment, and asked suspiciously, "Where are you going?" In this regard, Loya beckoned without looking back, "I'll arrange security measures. Then eat in peace." Security measures. Just when the two of them wondered how Luoya he suddenly turned into a dragon, waving his wings and submerging into the night. Then, the familiar sense of oppression suddenly rose, and they were stunned for a moment. As far as Loya's posture is concerned, who is he actually going to fight with? But of course Loya wasn't looking for someone to fight. In the next second, a terrifying cold air was passed from all directions, and the bonfire beside the two was quenched. Then, click. Whoa! A huge roar like a landslide resounded through the sand, and the calm sea suddenly rose. No, or a thick and tall ice wall. In the shocking eyes of a dry navy, the ice wall quickly rose, and then quickly spread to the left and right, submerging into the darkness. The calm forest just now became noisy immediately, and countless wild beasts and birds roared and fled in panic, not knowing what disaster had happened. But soon, the huge vibration stopped, and what appeared in front of everyone was a thick ice wall that wrapped the entire island. The ice wall is more than 3 meters thick and 20 meters high, standing on the sea, decorating it like a huge prison. Not to mention that people outside want to come in, even if people inside want to go out, it is as difficult as going to the sky. After doing this, Loya flew back to his seat very calmly, facing the godlike eyes of the soldiers, picked up his plate and continued to eat. Pat! The fire Yamanaka opened his mouth wide, and the cigar in his mouth fell on the plate without knowing it. Looking at the endless ice wall made by Loya, he was extremely confused at the moment. God's security measures. You are directly locking up Lousy and the others. But this is really a good way. Seeing this, Huo Shaoshan picked up the cigar and put it back in his mouth, opened the wet firewood on the bonfire, and found dry firewood to light it. Come on, have a good drink tonight. Oh, long live Lord Huo Shaoshan. Long live Lord Loya. The soldiers on the beach came back to their senses and cheered happily together. Not only are they proud of the powerful strength that Loya has shown, but also because in this way, they don't have to worry about safety at night. So, boom. Throwing the wine barrel to the soldiers not far away, Loya raised a wine glass and shouted loudly, "The banquet is over." Yes. Looking at the scene in front of him, Lieutenant General Dalmesia, who came back to his senses, muttered a few words, and then gave up and laughed. Okay, that's it. I won't be drunk tonight. However, he suddenly shouted violently, making the scene quiet for a moment. Facing the gazes of the soldiers, Dalmesia said with a sinister smile, "Tomorrow morning, we will set sail according to the original plan. If anyone can't get up by then, Hearing this sentence, the soldiers looked bitter, holding their wine glasses, not knowing if they should keep their mouths shut. Just as the Navy team was waiting for them to make jokes, suddenly, a silver-white light flashed in the distance. The three of them all had excellent eyesight, and even if the light was only fleeting, they were clearly captured by them. Then, with the sound of heavy objects falling into the sea, the ice wall over there disappeared directly. Looking at Loyana's powerful vision, a coffin boat with a length of one person was swaying and slowly heading towards the gap along the seawater. Even if the figure sitting on it can't see his face clearly, the weapon behind him is quite recognizable. Seeing this, Loya narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the unknown long knife at his feet. 10. Chapter 318 What Should I Do If I Piss Off Hawkeye? Wait online. The world's largest swordsman, Hawkeye Mahawk's news on the island, Huo Shaoshan told them when they came back. To be honest, Loya really wanted to see the honor of the strongest swordsman in the world. Especially when he was going to go to Clockwork Island to see if the skunk of the poker pirates had the same voice as Mahawk. However, considering the importance of his mission to go to sea this time, Loya gave up this idea with the attitude that one thing is worse than one less thing. However, now that Hawkeye has split his ice wall, no matter whether it is to repair or whatever, he seems to have to go there, and this meeting is unavoidable. Thinking of this, Loya stood up and said to Huo Shaoshan and Dalmesia, "It seems that Hawkeye is about to leave. I will go over to see the situation and fix the ice wall by the way." Huo Shaoshan bit his cigar and said to Loya with a serious face, "Be careful with Loya, I don't think he's in a high mood, don't fight him." "Ah, I'm still measured on this point," Loya said with a smile, then kicked the long knife wrapped in cloth on the ground with his feet, grabbed the back and put it on his back. "By the way, I have to ask the world's strongest swordsman, do you know what this sword is?" After that, Loya nodded to the two of them, flapped her wings, and flew in that direction. Seeing Loya quickly disappearing into the darkness, leaving only a vague figure in the moonlight, Huo Shaoshan said with a heart, "Dalmesia, do you think the current Loya will be Mahawk?" Opponent. Whether it is Loya or Mahawk, in the eyes of Huo Shaoshan, they are the kind of monsters that are outrageously powerful. It's just that Roha is not a swordsman, and he can't judge the strength of Roha through the sixth sense among swordsmen, so there is such a question. Hearing Huo Shaoshan's question, Lieutenant General Dalmesia rolled his eyes at him angrily. "You can't think of something better. Why did they have to fight? The other party is Chihuahai, regardless of whether Loya wins or loses, we are not easy to explain to the world government. Although it is a bit frustrating, it is also a fact." So, Huo Shaoshan waved his hand, coughed twice, and signaled that this stubble should be put aside first. At the other end, with the convenient way of moving, Loya quickly came to the vicinity of the boat. His arrival was already perceived by Mahawk, and a pair of eagle-like eyes stared at Loya. And the long knife on his back. Landing not far from the boat, Loya stepped on the sea and froze the sea to settle down, and said to the other party, "Mr. Mahawk, are you interested in having a chat?" For Loya's question, Mahawk held his hand and turned his eyes. "You are not a swordsman, and I am not a navy. I don't think there is anything to chat between us. Christopher Loya, the famous Ice Dragon Lieutenant General. Hawkeye actually knows his name." This makes Loya a little flattered. It seems that the propaganda Sengoku has been doing for himself is still very effective. Even the eagle-eyed Mahawk of Shanyanyahei knows his name. Immediately, Loya smiled and said, "I am ashamed to be ashamed. In front of the world's strongest swordsman, what kind of fame is my reputation? Mr. Mahawk really praised me. Everyone carries the sedan chair, even if Hawkeye doesn't like to flatter, but in the face of Loya's obvious kindness, he is not interested in continuing to be aggressive." And so, the boat moved on. Looking at this situation, Luoya was stunned for a moment. Why didn't this person play cards according to the routine? Shouldn't you hold me a sentence and I hold you a sentence, and let's chat with each other kindly? Why did you just leave now? So Loya shouted and pulled out the long knife behind him. Of course, he definitely didn't want to compete with Hawkeye in swordsmanship. That's not called death, it's called death. Wait a minute, I want to ask you about this knife. At the moment when Loya pulled the long knife out of the tangled cloth, Hawkeye's pair of eagle-like eyes rarely closed in front of the person. At the same time, he pulled up the hem of the wine yuhi-colored coat and blocked it in front of him. It's like preventing something dazzling. It's just that from Loya's perspective, Hawkeye's series of actions looks a bit ridiculous. It was obviously dark all around, and it was impossible to see anything from 5 meters away. But more than 10 meters away, Hawkeye was holding a cloth in front of his eyes. Watching Hawkeye's movements quietly, a smile appeared on the corner of Loya's mouth. It seems that Mr. Mahawk really knows this weapon. He really deserves to be the #1 swordsman in the world. After about a few seconds, it seemed that he was not blinded. Mahawk loosened the hem of his clothes and quietly looked at the long knife in Loya's hand. This has nothing to do with whether I am the world's largest swordsman. It's just that my teacher has been looking for this weapon before he died, so I also heard about it. Home, teacher. WTF. This news is a bit of a blast. It is true that Hawkeye Mahawk is now recognized as the world's largest swordsman, and his swordsmanship does not need much explanation. Just from the relationship between him and Yuhitha, it can be seen that his strength is definitely the level of the top few people in the world. But from the 10,000 feet of tall buildings on the ground, don't look at the terrifying reputation of Hawkeye Mahawk, but he is also an ordinary person who has grown up step by step from practicing with a wooden knife. So the question is, who will be the master of the world's greatest swordsman? Although according to Mahawk's words, his master has gone west and is dead, but who is he? I really want to know. Immediately, Loya looked at Mahawk with bright eyes, and asked eagerly, Master. Mr. Mahawk, who is your master? Can you tell me? Mahawk. By the way, aren't we talking about this knife? You're changing too fast, and I'm not very good at interface. So Mahawk never looked at Loya again, and said quietly, Suddenly I don't want to talk anymore, see you next time. After all, the coffin-like boat accelerated and was about to leave the ice wall. How could Roha allow him to leave like this? Stomping his feet directly, the terrifying cold spread rapidly along the sea, and directly froze Mahawk's boat in place. See. After doing this, before he had time to speak, a strong murderous intent suddenly covered Roha, causing the scales on his back to shrink involuntarily. Put it in his normal state, at this moment he has goosebumps all over. In this strong murderous aura, Mahawk's voice was indistinct and indeterminate. Do you want me to cut you down and grab a warship to leave? Mr. Ice Dragon Loya. It's over, you're going to die, you're going to die. It seems that he seems to have annoyed him. Now Loya has no confidence that he can escape to heaven in the hands of a strong man like Hawkeye or a swordsman with powerful offensive power. So the question is, how to escape the world's largest swordsman by accident? It is best to attach pictures and texts to answer, tell the truth. Waiting online, it is very urgent. Chapter 319 Actually, I'm a swordsman. It's all a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. Actually, I think we can sit down and talk, Mr. Mahawk. At the critical moment, Loya's head turned rapidly, using words to comfort Hawkeye who had put his hand on the hilt of the black knife. Look, on this desolate island where birds don't shit, maybe no one will come here once in a few years, and you and I just met here by chance. Do you think this is fate? As the saying goes, we meet each other thousands of miles away, but we don't know each other on the other side. In this case, I think we have a reason to sit down, have a sip of wine, and chat about life. Don't you think? As Loya said, the cold sweat on his head couldn't stop flowing down. What a hell, he just wanted to ask Hawkeye who your master was, but he was so excited that he froze his boat in place. For a powerhouse of this level, his behavior is undoubtedly a provocation by name. If Hawkeye can't understand that this is a misunderstanding, then he will definitely cut himself with a knife. Hawkeye's knife, I am afraid that few people in this world are interested in taking it hard. Loya's lame rhetoric makes people laugh, but Hawkeye has confirmed one thing through these words. That Loya is not provoking himself. Nonsense. Have you ever seen a provocation that turns into a dog in less than a second? Combined with some news about Loya from Yuhi's source, he was very sure that this guy's behavior was the same as Erha's. And just as Huo Shaoshan and Dalmija are concerned about the identity of each other's Chihuahai, Hawkeye is also concerned about the identity of the Loya Navy. So, in the face of Loya's soft service, Mahawk slowly released his hand that was already on the black knife, and said lightly, There is no need to chat, I understand what you want to know, but you are not a swordsman. I won't tell you. Seeing Hawkeye let go of his hostility, Loya heaved a sigh of relief. Do you still need to be a swordsman? What is this, a martial arts RPG? Do you need a corresponding identity to trigger a quest with a quest item? You are not an NPC, okay. Holding his chin, Loya pondered for 2 seconds, suddenly raised his head, and looked at Hawkeye solemnly. Originally, I was thinking about how long I could hide it, but at present, the current situation does not allow me to continue to hide it. So, Mahawk felt very strange seeing Loya's face suddenly change to a serious face. But he didn't say anything, just watched Loya's performance quietly. Bah! Loya shouted loudly, raised the long knife in his hand, and danced in circles. While waving the long knife in his hand, he still said something in his mouth, "Look at my Washin swordsmanship. Shirakumo is out. Swish. There is a phoenix. Laugh. Kingsong welcomes guests. Puff. Boom. Hey hey." After finishing the set of swordsmanship, Loya put his sword on his back and stood proudly on the sea. "Actually, I am a swordsman. It's just that I am a low-key person, and I don't want to expose myself and... Hey. Be careful, it's going to die." Before Loya pretended to be X, he twitched the corner of Hawkeye's eyes, raised his eyebrows, and cut vertically while holding the black knife. The sharp sword cut through the hard ice and sank into the forest unabated. If Loya dodged a little slower, then his end should be the same as those trees in the forest, cut into 2 pieces and fell to the ground. Seeing Roha panicking but finally dodging his slash, Mahawk made a regretful cut, then stared at Roha with those unique eagle eyes, and said solemnly, "Don't insult these 2 swordsmen. Word. Although the moves you just played were imposing, but they were nothing more than relying on your brute force. Other than that, there is no pattern at all." After all, Hawkeye held the black knife and quickly waved it around him several times. Only the sound of chi-chi-chi was heard, and the layer of ice frozen around the boat was easily cut open, leaving no ice chips on the boat, but the boat was unscathed. Withdrawing the black knife, Hawkeye sat back in his seat, and said without raising his head, "Forget it this time. If there is another time, I will definitely cut you." After speaking, the coffin-like boat swayed and moved on, gradually disappearing into the darkness. During this process, Loya said nothing, quietly watching Hawkeye go away. It's not that he was understood by Hawkeye's words, and he felt emotional. But just now, the strength displayed by Hawkeye made him act rashly. After coming to this world for so long, the strongest swordsman he has ever seen is probably Yuhi Fashanks that he saw on Ian Island. The sword that cut through the clouds in the sky left a deep impression on him. Even now, half a year later, his strength has greatly increased, and he still has lingering fears when he thinks of the sword shadow he saw before. "I thought it was the top scenery in the world, but..." Just now, the sword wielded by Hawkeye was not as terrifying as Shanks' sword in terms of power and momentum. But what it brought to Loya was another feeling that was not inferior, even stronger, that made his scalp tingle. It was obviously just a sword, but in Loya's eyes, it seemed that there were thousands of sharp knives rushing towards him, and they were about to slash him. The skin all over his body seemed to be pricked by needles, filled with dense pain, as if the skin would be torn apart in the next moment. If Shanks's sword is the kind of domineering and courageous sword of kingship, that eagle-eyed sword is the kind of killing sword that condenses the might of destroying the world and is extremely fierce. It's no wonder that Hawkeye would say the words, "Don't insult swordsmen." Compared with their existence at the peak of kendo, it is indeed intolerable for him to copy the fake handle on TV and kung fu magazines. If you are not a navy, you dare to die like this in front of Hawkeye, then your end must be very bad. After a long time, Loya gently exhaled a breath of turbid air in his lungs. Now that Hawkeye has left, there is no reason why he wants to know the origin of this sword. Perhaps, he can inform Marshal Sengoku and let him use the Navy's intelligence system to help him check. Shaking his head, Loya smiled bitterly, turned and flew towards the camp. Meanwhile, at sea. The tranquil sea is so deep and charming, it is dark all around, and the moonlight and starlight are projected on the sea, making it difficult to tell where is the sky and where is the sea. There is only one small boat, flickering with weak candlelight, floating quietly between the sea and the sky. Lying in the boat, Mahawk looked up at the bright moonlight in the sky and fell into deep thought. You actually recognize that kind of guy as the master, teacher. Is your judgment really wrong? This afternoon, Hawkeye went to the ruins of the temple that was demolished by Loya. He has been exposed to the aura of the glory of the stars since he was a child, and he is still carrying it close to his body, so he will never admit it wrong. Slowly holding the cross knife on his chest, Mahawk closed his eyes and quietly felt the breath from above. Anyway, now that it has found its true owner, you can rest in peace too. The breeze hit, ripples rippling. The small sailboat swayed on the sea, leaving ripples after circle after circle. 89. G_Cup actress Idol's first shot A_V wins the championship. Watch online. Please pay attention to the WeChat public account. Mainblue 123, press and hold for 3 seconds to copy. Chapter 320 now. On the beach of the island, the Navy soldiers who were enjoying the banquet had no idea what was going on, and were still noisily holding the banquet. Only the 2 lieutenant generals, Huo Shaoshan and Dalmesia, who were sitting in the distance, were worried and had difficulty swallowing the food. The 2 of them have been paying attention to the situation on Loya's side, and the sword light wielded by Hawkeye was naturally discovered by them. They don't know what the situation is over there, so they can only pray that Loya doesn't fight with each other. Because in case of a real fight, these ordinary soldiers on the beach have nowhere to run. Loya's strength is obvious to all. At the level of a general, the scene of the 2 fighting against each other is absolutely devastating. This island is not big at all, and it was blocked by Loya with an ice wall. Once the 2 fight, they really want to cry without tears. Fortunately, since the sword light passed, there has been no more news. This made the 2 of them relieved, and at the same time they couldn't help but bring up a heart. Loya, shouldn't it be, was it killed in seconds? Hey, it seems that this is really possible. Hey, Huo Shaoshan, do you think Loya is still alive? Lieutenant General Dalmesia took the roast with chopsticks, dipped it in the dipping chan, and put it in his mouth. Well, he still swallowed. Well, shouldn't it be? Huo Shaoshan replied uncertainly. Hawkeye is indeed a guy worthy of vigilance, but he is not the kind of person who kills innocent people indiscriminately. Loya didn't trick him or provoke him, he shouldn't hurt the killer. But then again, judging from Loya's usual performance, the probability that he won't provoke Hawkeye. Not to mention it. Thinking of this, Huo Shaoshan looked up in the direction Loya left, frowning. At this moment, he blinked and seemed to see a black shadow moving on the sea, and immediately stood up. Looking carefully, the 2 wide bat wings flapped against the sea water, creating countless waves. That's Loya, he's back, Huo Shaoshan cried with joy. Immediately, Lieutenant General Dalmesia also stood up and looked around. Where is it? Is he alive? Are there any missing arms or legs? Fire Mountain. Call out. A shot of ice spear suddenly came straight out of the air and nailed it between Lieutenant General Dalmesia's legs. Sticking close to his trousers on the ground, if it is slightly crooked, this ice spear will directly pierce the indescribable part below his neck. Dalmesia screeched strangely and hurriedly shrank back. Loya's speed was very fast, and listening to Dalmesia's words accelerated his speed even more. As soon as he landed, he picked up the roast leg of lamb with a bad expression and gnawed it, staring dangerously at the latter. I don't have any missing arms or legs, I'm really sorry, bastard. Seeing that Loya is safe and sound, and can still eat meat with big mouthfuls, Yamanaka will finally feel relieved, and wave his hand like a good man. Well, it's just a joke, it's really good that you're fine, Loya. Hearing Huo Shaoshan rounding up the field next to him, Loya snorted twice and stopped answering. Lieutenant General Dalmesia looked embarrassed and found a seat farther away. This time it was a shame. At his age, he even arranged the younger generation behind his back. This is not to say, it was also listened to by the parties. He also suddenly remembered that Loya's 5 senses are different from ordinary people. In the past, when he was at the naval headquarters, Sengoku stayed in his office and said a few words to him, and he could hear him clearly when he was passing the time in the square. Even if this is not as practical as observation hockey, it is a very capable ability that cannot be underestimated. As for what happened after hearing that, I won't say much. Anyway, he often sees that the windows of Marshal Sengoku's office are broken, and there are people shoveling ice inside and sending them out. The small fight stopped, and when everyone sat down again, Huo Shaoshan asked, "How about Loya? Did you ask anything? I really don't know what the situation is with this knife. As long as it is flashed once, it will not be flashed a second time. Therefore, the first time I saw the fire of this knife, I felt the pain of the two before, and now I still have lingering fears when I think about it. If you can understand the reason, you can blindly blind the enemy according to the master's will. This knife is not very useful. Don't say it's crooked. In this world, strength is respected. Black cats and white cats, as long as they can catch mice, they are good cats. If this knife was found not by Loya but by Dalmisia, Huo Shaoshan would not mind pulling his face down to trade with Dalmisia and exchange it for it. Anyway, the opponent is not a swordsman, so holding such a good weapon is a waste. Therefore, he was very curious about the secret in the knife. Hearing Huo Shaoshan's question, Loya couldn't help remembering what Mahak said when he left. After a pause, he thought about it carefully, and slowly said, "Hawkeye said I'm not a swordsman, so he can't tell me. So I decided to take a photo and send it back, and let Marshal Sengoku help us check it. I can't tell you because I'm not a swordsman. This is really," Huo Shaoshan sighed and smiled, "it's really Mahak's style of doing things. As the strongest swordsman in the world today, Mahak undoubtedly has the pride that belongs to the swordsman alone, or it is a kind of responsibility. Seeing that Luo Ya, a notoriously violent person holding such a good sword, forced Mingzu to dust, it was reasonable not to tell him." For Huo Shaoshan's statement, Loya did not nod. Perhaps, this is also related to Mahak's teacher who has never appeared before. Maybe it was because of his master's last words, so he didn't tell himself. And the reason why he came to this deserted island this time is probably to find this knife. I don't know if it's because I gave up or something wrong, but it was me who finally found this knife, not him. Fortunately, Hawkeye did not have the idea of snatching, otherwise Royake would really find it difficult. In all fairness, if you really want to fight for life and death, even if you are defeated, you can leave an unforgettable mark on Hawkeye for a lifetime. And the other party is different from the Dorag he met before. There is no companion to restrain them. Once the two meet, it is really an endless scene. Fortunately, Hawkeye didn't snatch it, so Loya still has time to study it carefully. Broken dragon scales, weird temples, mysterious weapons, and Hawkeye's master hidden in the mist. All kinds of things are linked together, and Loya feels that the things behind it may not be so simple. Let Marshal Sengoku help you find the news. Huo Shaoshan touched his chin, took off the cigar and shook the ashes. It seems that this is the only way to go now. Well, let's put this matter aside for now, and we have to get up early tomorrow. Go, eat and sleep quickly. Quote. Oh, yes, a banquet is now. Loya's eyes lit up, holding the leg of lamb in one hand, and the wine barrel beside him in the other, and feasted. Regardless of the conclusion, enjoy the present is the most important thing. Coming to this world, it is already a great luck to be able to continue worrying about trivial matters such as starting a family and starting a business. Why bother to think about this and that? Today there is wine and today is drunk. Tomorrow's sorrow come tomorrow's sorrow. Life is alive, as it should be. 9110.